abstract. Yeah, it's complicated. What you say, the way you act. Well, it makes me so confused. I don't know what to do anymore. Can't you just make up your mind? My heart drops when you play around. How can you be up when I'm down? Don't wanna think about it right now. Maybe you just wanna be friends, but there's a fight when we are talking. Maybe you just wanna pretend, but I can read between the lines. Even if I can't deny that all the things you said are hurting, still wanna be with you. I think you want it too. 'Cause baby, I don't wanna be. Baby, I don't wanna be. No, baby, I don't wanna be. Baby, I don't wanna be. How it hurts to see you smile, like a dagger in me. She just seems so juvenile. I just want it to be me. I wanna set your world on fire. Oh, you're so sure I'll stick around. Oh, my heart drops when you play around. How can you be up when I'm down? Don't wanna think about it right now. Maybe you just wanna be friends, but there's a fight when we are talking. Maybe you just wanna pretend, but I can read between the lines. Even if I can't deny that all the things you said are hurting, still wanna be with you. I think you want it too. 'Cause baby, I don't wanna be. Baby, I don't wanna be. Oh, even if I can't deny that all the things you said are hurting, still wanna be with you. I think you want it too. 'Cause baby, I don't wanna be. No, baby, I don't wanna be. No, baby, I don't wanna be. Baby, I don't wanna be.
I see something, it's coming up on the horizon. Oh, let me clear my head and get rid of the distractions. Oh, I was done, I was down when I saw you in the clouds. Out of phase, filled with doubt. I was drifting in and out, levitate, fade away. I had left full time and space, but you just caught my eye. Hey, nah, 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 nah. Please won't you come over? Let me get to know ya. Hey, nah, 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 nah. Delve into emotion, leave us in this moment. Yeah. Let your mind be free. Stop holding back 'cause you can't fight it. Oh, I don't know your name, but something in me has ignited. Oh, I was done, I was down when I saw you in the clouds. Out of phase, filled with doubt. I was drifting in and out, levitate, fade away. I had left full time and space, but you just caught my eye. Hey, nah, 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 nah. Please won't you come over? Let me get to know ya. Hey, nah, 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 nah. Delve into emotion, leave us in this moment. look at me like I'm crazy. When I shut my feelings down, you look at me like I'm different. Still you stay cause you feel something real. Get so lost in my moments. Doesn't mean I don't need you. I fell in love with your colors. They kinda tell me what I'm thinking. I fell in love with the way we are and the way we lose it. There's something different about us, and the reason why we stay. We fly around like paper planes. We never know where we will fall. Nobody can see us, still they wanna tear us apart. There's something different about the way we are. There's something different about us. 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 We're pouring cup after cup after cup. Yeah, it's just the way we do it. Anything just to block out the real life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our second day of the first open qualifiers for the RiftMSTRS $30,000 tournament. I'm Dia, joined by Zephyr, of course, to break down the most wild of all Riftly action. Starting off with our semifinals, who we got, Zephyr?
We are going to be taking a look at Cloud9 versus Immortals as our first match of the day. Two absolute monstrosities here to join us on what will be the Rift.
I'm really excited to see the Cloud9 versus Immortals matchup because, as you know, yesterday we were talking up the jungler, especially for Cloud9, with Tarzan and Meals able to work really well together. It seems like they got a really good thing going, but Immortals, interestingly enough, as opposed to a lot of our other teams joining us in the semifinals, don't play a very jungle-centric style. Their bot lane was what was popping off.
Absolutely. We saw an absolute crash of just 2 games coming into semifinals between Gume and Charm carrying the pack here with some doubtably great combos. We saw that Xayah, that Ashe, that Rakan, that Braum, smooth play that allowed them to easily carry both of their victories.
That Rakan has really haunted my nightmares, especially with the 12-minute game that they had yesterday, the fastest yet. That was some incredible wild ripped here. And interestingly enough, Yikes, a jungler that I'm sure, you know, we'll get the chance to talk about as he goes up against Tarzan, did favor the Graves 2 times in a row. And I'm curious whether that's something that C9 are going to try and adapt to or out of, how Immortals are going to respond to their jungler being pushed out of their comfort zone, because that is something that Cloud9 are, I expect, going to try and double down on. This jungle win condition for them is going to force Immortals to really pay a lot of attention to the pace at which they're playing the map, because playing for your jungle, in a way, is relatively straightforward. It's a very quick game of Wild Rift. You got to join up when our fight's happening, you got to support your jungler, and that's it. Playing for a very specific lane, though, can feel very limiting in the sense that your jungler and even your mid laner get restricted to one side of the rift, allowing the other one to be exploited if you're not careful.
That is true, but I will say it's not just all the Tarzan game from C9. You brought it up earlier, and there's definitely a lot of presence out of Meals, and I would say we wouldn't be here talking about Cloud9 today if not for the success on Meals that we had. And yes, we can give credit to Tarzans for making that work, but that Corki coming into the last game against Nascent was absolutely massive, and it was a dominant force that allowed them to actually process through that game in a much better fashion. So, you know what, jungle win conditions aside, I think there's a lot of prowess and just play to go through every single lane with this team.
Yeah, we've got a lot to look forward to. I know that we saw this sort of meta developing yesterday. There was some Varus that was let through that looked really good, and I am curious to see how things... No. Varus looked good. It was like...
No, it does. I agree.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
All I want to say is let through is maybe an overstatement. It was banned out so many times because the presence held by that champion right now is absolutely daunting. So I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I don't know if we'll be seeing it here today particularly, but I definitely would be very excited if we did so.
Yeah, things like the Nami as well we can look out for, although it's worth bringing up that this may be your first time tuning into this kind of Wild Rift over here at RiftMSTRS, and we're in the first Open Qualifier, so why don't we take a second, break that kind of stuff down, because it is the second day. Day one already gone and passed. We had the best of ones until the quarterfinals, went through all the quarterfinals, and now day two, we're starting off in the semis. However, if you missed this Open Qualifier, you still have the chance to compete in the next couple.
Absolutely. So today we're going to wrap this one up. You got your semis, your third place potentially, and the finals all breaking out to be those best of three. So some absolute bangers here to move on. And I'll tell you what, it's not just those placement points they're competing for. There's a lot more on the line.
Yeah, for the 5th through 8th, of course, we're determined yesterday. 250 is going to be the prize pool for them, but today, the more we move up the bracket, 500, 800, all the way up to 1600 is on the line with the playoffs, the things that you're all competing for throughout these three qualifiers, netting you a whole heck of a lot more money, so you can not only be making your living during the qualifiers, but as you're moving into playoffs as well, you get the promise of even more of that cash.
So a lot sitting out there on the board here today. A statement waiting to be proven by all four of our teams. We're obviously starting with Cloud9 and Immortals, but I also want to make sure that everyone knows that we've also got Chortle and Nagawara also on the sidelining, just waiting to play and strut their stuff as well.
Yeah, those are going to be our second semifinals of the day, so we've got plenty of Wild Rift action for you. Things are going to continue changing throughout the night as well, as I am still expecting Chortles and Nagawara to have a very similar interplay between them. Nagawara, a very different squad, and one that, importantly, we did not get to stream yesterday. This is a squad that is sort of coming up as a ghost to spook Chortles. Even though we've left October, it's going to be a very different matchup and one that they won't have been able to prep for in the same way. But enough about the second semifinals. We're popping into the first one. Immortals and Cloud9. Draft has already begun. Importantly, that Senna Vera is taken away by Cloud9.
Cloud9 here already banning that one out, and it is no surprise. Notably, Senna, the most banned champion here against Immortals coming out of our recent play here. So to see that one locked down, I'm not surprised. The Viego, that is a choice that I'm also very, very interested in, but it shouldn't be that much a surprise. All three of the games yesterday here from Cloud9 were all played through. So Jackie, this is a big pick to take away, and I'm curious what they're going to fill in instead.
And with the Olaf ban coming in last, Immortals are removing some of the Tarzan ability from the Rift. It has looked really nice on the Olaf. I think a big question for me is, given this, is he going to go for something like that Xin Zhao that is also a really powerful early game skirmisher, and whether they're going to be able to pick up something like a Camille at the same time, because Camille Fiora, we've been talking about constantly as these sideline split pushers, but Camille, importantly, has that flexibility to be put into the jungle as well, and can be a really potent first or second pick.
I will say there is a little bit flexibility, though, through Zelo here on the top side. So even if that Camille doesn't come through at any given point, there's a lot more to work with. We talk about the Malphite, the Darius. These are things that he decided to pull through, and definitely a little bit more team-oriented, but still held its footing as we worked in. But now we finish it off with that final Ashe ban, so targeting out that bot lane that we talked about being a heavy strength here from Immortals.
I really like the Ashe ban. The Camille that we talked about makes sense, and I understand why that came through. Much the same with the Corki. It's a very safe scaling pick that you can have for later. But the Ashe that you talked about being specifically targeted at Gume is interesting, and Cloud9 get to double down on that by taking away Charm's Rakan at the same time. This is a very, very heavily prepared matchup, and you can tell because Cloud9 are doing their utmost to remove agency from Immortals.
Yeah, there is not many picks left up on that board here, but the Xayah is still going to be coming through here to set up Immortals at least somewhat well. The scaling might take just a little bit longer, but it has its presence. I would like to see that secured with something with great and heavy engage, or else there's not going to be much of a tool to really route through when we talk about specifically Gume.
Yeah, I'm wondering what Immortals are going to play like here, because the Galio will give you some of it. I like what they've got, and specifically with the Galio, they have some great counter engage to work with. I think my curiosity lies in whether they'll actually get something that can dive a backline, or whether with the Xayah and Corki, they try and play a more defensively oriented composition that lets them scale up, because Cloud9, as of right now, are going to have to engage in them, and Immortals have a lot of counterplay to that sort of game plan. Cloud9 get the chance to double down on that, and they certainly will with that Kai'Sa being locked in. We know that this can be flexed to the mid lane as well, so a lot of flexibility there. It might not be the bot lane. However, the important thing is that the composition is staying within the same line that it was drawing earlier. Heavy dive, heavy engage, and Immortals can continue to draft against it.
Exactly. That win condition is now set in tow here for Cloud9, and I'm curious to see how it progresses further. They're going to stem out with that Twisted Fate to secure the mid lane and now spread the wealth across the map here, which I really, really like. And I think it's going to put a good foot here and allow for some of these carries to get to the point where they actually have more of a diverse set of skills that they can work in, especially into something that scales as late or as difficult as the Immortals comp for now. But notably, that jungle isn't quite picked yet, so I'm very, very interested to see what they put on Tarzan here, because that's the big key.
I'm feeling like they're going to let him take the Camille right now. I want to see him have that early engaged potential, and Camille certainly brings you that. Lee Sin on the other side, though, something Tarzan looked really good on yesterday, is at least going to be denied and given over to Immortals. So that'll give us the chance to see whether it'll look as clean for them as it did for Cloud9 in the first game, as this one is going to be a best of 3, and even that initial momentum really can mean a lot, especially for Immortals, who were our only squad to go 2-0 on stream yesterday.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, on stream, there's some off stream that definitely held just as much presence, but we'll get to those stories later. For now, though, I definitely think this is a good take to level the amount of aggression that will be out in the field. And the Gragas definitely plays into it well. You talk about the peel, the pressure that they're going to have to remove. The Gragas will definitely make sure that you divide and conquer. And the Xin Xiao being that final pick to work in for Cloud9 is exactly what I wanted. This is how they finished up their last match coming out of quarterfinals here. And it was something that maybe didn't look as dominant out of Tarzan, but definitely allowed for him to really get his major carries on a good foot forward. And when we look at Griff down there in that bot lane with the Kai'Sa, that's something I really want to see take the star shine.
I like that you mentioned the Kai'Sa here as being the most potent source of damage on Cloud9. It's something that Griff is really going to need to step up to, and we'll get the chance, of course, to see how that one works out for them. But the important thing is going to be also how the rest of the squad is playing the map, because Cloud9 have a very high level of execution with their composition that Immortals don't necessarily, and it mainly stems from the Twisted Fate. Meals has a lot of pressure on him, one would say almost as much as Griff, because actually where you are at any given point during the game as Twisted Fate is going to mean so much. Immortals don't have a response to that side lane in any tangible way, which is why Twisted Fate is so important and so powerful right now. Cloud9, they get the chance to engage, but into all the counter engage that Immortals have, they have that TF to say, well, if you're not going to let us fight you, we're still going to take objectives elsewhere. And how they're balancing that, how they're communicating is going to mean so much come that mid game.
Absolutely. And to play off that point here, the major person I want to look at from Immortals to kind of counteract that level of speed is Hoon on this Corki. I think that's going to make a huge impression throughout the majority of the game, especially as we approach that mid game. We talk about speed of play, rotation ability, the effect of cross map control definitely will come from him alone. And while it's not going to be as quick or as impressive as what we might be seeing here out of the Twisted Fate, it can still hold a heavy handle, especially if you let it go unchecked.
And to pile on top of that, it can spike pretty darn early as well. A lot of times we will see that package used as soon as the first dragon is coming up, and even though Corki hasn't actually hit the item breakpoints that you're expecting from such a heavy scaling champion, he can still blow games wide open with some really nice package placement. You can act as this pseudo engage, you can split team fights, you have so much versatility on the Corki that honestly gets underestimated a lot in these team fights, and Cloud9 are going to have to play around that, and it's going to give Hoon the chance to shine if he does find those picture perfect things. And well, with all of with all that pressure on him, I think that it's only fair that we talk about Charm on the Galio, or expected to be on the Galio as well, because that is a champion and a player that made a big splash yesterday, and Galio can continue to do that by following up dive from the likes of perhaps Hoon, perhaps Yikes.
And I honestly think when we look at his play on the Braum and Rakan yesterday, it definitely put forward a lot of pressure. I also think the Galio can do just that. Now, there's a little bit more of a punished effort here if he doesn't get that split-second notion on the Galio at any given point, which could potentially be capitalized on by Cloud9. So, it's going to be tougher, but it's definitely going to allow for the skill to be expressed here out of Charm, which I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, and so much focus was put onto Charm by Cloud9 with that second pick Rakan. They know that they can't let that one go through, and given the fact that they take away the Camille as well, I think that if you see the Galio succeeding, it throws a wrench into the plans of Cloud9, because all of a sudden, the person they've doubled, even tripled down on denying impact to, they now have to reconsider and say, okay, well, we did throw the Senate ban at him, we did take the Ashe away from Gume, but somehow the spot lane is still engaging. Now what can we do? And that's going to be a big question right now, is dropping to the Rift just in time for first blood. Hoon picking up that one is exactly what you had shown us, Zephyr.
Already the start of the match in flames here, giving over 1 kill to the Immortals, and that is in the exact place you want it. And it's going to prevent Meals from being that much of an issue, especially if you allow this Corki to continue growing. You talk about those spikes early, that will just accelerate what we're already waiting for.
And has managed to get that initial back in as well, with Meals just showing up into the mid lane. We've got the big spike that is in the early game with the ability to crit on the Corki, giving Hoon an additional bit of mid lane priority. That's going to translate really well when it comes to Hoon. But remember, you got to be worried because Tarzan wants to shut you down early, and already he's showing up in that mid lane, applying a little bit more pressure alongside Yikes. Both these jugglers very aware that the rest of the map is going to hinge on these two in the mid lane.
I honestly did not expect it to be this intense here in the mid lane. Like, we amped it up. We talked about Meals and Hoon both holding presence in terms of controlling the outward aspects of the map. But to see Tarzan and Yikesy already full foot forward trying to make this work is an absolute surprise.
Tarzan going on a bit of an invade as well is going to initiate some nice vertical jungling. Well, Yikes does the same on the other side of the map, backed up by his own bot lane. A little bit of pressure is drawn from the mid lane, pulling Meals down or up to make sure that this one ends up happening. And it's going to be spotted right now by Iraqi Zoro, but unfortunately in the bot lane, things are not going in the same way.
Nope.
C9 having plenty of free time, where Iraqi Zoro gets to retreat under his tower for free. And Griff, unfortunately, suffers for it in the bot lane.
Right, we see that dive come through there from Yikesy, easily able to secure that one out. Looks like there was a little bit of pressure by the turret, but it was easily capitalized on. So they put already Gume in a very nice specific location, especially since we have, in comparison to Kai'Sa, it's going to be much tougher when we get to that mid and late game. So having the extra early advantage to pull out is definitely good, but Mike Z already quick back out there.
Overstaying in a big way. Tarzan just sticks around that top lane for much too long and lets Yikes walk all the way back up, have that buy-in already, and is able to really take him down quite quickly with the backup of this Gragas that is always going to be providing the CC for those centralized damage carries. In the early game, of course, it's going to be Yikes, but later, it's going to be Hoon and Gume, who have 2 kills of their own. With all of the right people carrying the gold on Immortals, C9 have got to start to sweat and look for their own way back to this game around Tarzan's ganks. It's got to be him and Zello that are setting up the rest of the team for success come mid-game.
Right, and I am curious to see how Zello does play into this one. It's still in that very early phase where you don't quite have the grouping just yet, but it will be potentially that deal breaker, and if it doesn't come through, I don't see much of a route for C9. Now, we are still waiting for those windows and the major rotations from Meals that will swing this game potentially back into the favor of Cloud9, but as of yet, nothing to behold.
Still a relatively, I would say it was a relatively even game. We've got Immortals off to a nice lead, but Cloud9, we know, can come back from the likes of things like this. With Yikes around this top lane, we know that they want that Rift Herald, and Immortals seem to be opting into this trade, instead taking the Dragon, or rather, Immortals taking the Rift Herald, and Cloud9 opting into the trade, taking the Dragon right now. It's a nice thing to see, is no early fighting from Cloud9, especially that we know that they would likely lose. It's going to mean that they get to scale themselves up, have a little bit of extra CDR with the Drake, and a little bit of extra move speed as well.
You know what? I'm fine with a handshake right now. The last thing that they need is for the extra aggression not to play in their favor, because you start looking at some of those spikes and they're already becoming so daunting. We're talking about an extra 1,000 on 2 of your major carries, notably Yikes coming right off the bat and double ganks up in both the bot and the top side. For now, though, they extend that rift, going to pressure down this top turret and actually take it entirely.
And a big part of why you don't fight that, either the turret or the Rift Herald, is because of the spikes not only in the items, not only in the gold, but in the levels as well. So much potency comes from especially Yikes level 6 with the Dragon's Rage, from Gume and his ability to disengage, and from Charm's ability to knock up so many people from across the map that taking a fight into Immortals right now for at least the next 2 minutes is going to be really difficult. You've got to get the item spikes going as C9, and most importantly, you have that cross-map play with Meals that you need to get going. Now that top lane outer has been broken, I'd like to see C9 put Meals up there, rotate the mid lane, or rotate the bot lane into the mid lane, and have Camille go bot instead.
I would like to see that as well, but for now, we'll have to wait until those next backs come through. After that, though, I am more than curious to start seeing what Immortals can do with this expressive lead. We've talked about now what C9 has the opportunity. And then, my apologies, look at some of those major item spikes that have now finally graced themselves here. We talk about what is that Trinity Force, the execution on the board here for Zai. These are huge turning points in terms of what they have to work with.
Giving them some really nice spikes to transition throughout this game is a really nice thing in terms of the itemization. I absolutely see what you're talking about, Zephyr. I think that a really big thing for me as well is going to be, given the item spikes that they have, whether that turn is actually possible when it comes to turning it into kills, turning it into objectives they aren't already set up at. Because if it comes to engaging under towers, Immortals actually have very little to work with. They're very much set up defensively, and even that is not working in the mid lane. Hoon ends up going down, although it's going to be answered with Yikes coming in just in time, and the exhaust not saving Meals' life. We've even got Tarzan being hunted down, but the recall should take him to safety.
Yikes constantly here. We saw him shadowing what was that bot lane, and they were remarkably unable to find the engage that they wanted, but the quick turnaround to appear in mid after what was supposed to be a decent dive to finally grace Cloud9's presences was easily managed and equaled out here.
And now that Cloud9 have attempted to play, actually gotten one going with the kill onto Meals, it's even more important to start using this Twisted Fate in where he is most powerful. If you've got this quote-unquote side laner ahead, you've got to be getting the vision down to support him, get him out there, and let Griff and Jackie take over the mid lane, who right now are sort of wandering around the map. Jackie's looking for plays alongside Tarzan, but they're moving into the bot lane where Immortals are already playing super safe. If you think Immortals bot lane doesn't know how to play the game, you have not been watching them, because these guys are dominant in a lot of these games, and even now, when they're not the focus, know how to not lose it for their team.
Curious if they have that information on the board. You've got all 4 members now down here from Cloud9, and this is a lot of space to potentially waste if you're not careful. Now, there is the spot right off the board there as the Camille's going to go into Charm, but a quick root and a double Tom will end that fight resoundingly. Heroic entrance coming in for a nice knockup on Tarzan, but it's not before the return comes through from Zelo. A good feathered pull is going to root Meals right in his tracks as Yikesy keeps Griff off of this back. It's going to be a trade for a trade there, as hopefully Griff is able to outwalk this one.
4 members dead on Cloud9, though, to the 2 of Immortals. It leaves no question as to who came out on top of that play. Immortals get a sweet counter-engage in their own jungle on a play that Cloud9 set up, and now they're going to be able to get the mid lane tower after it as well, although it might cost Iraqi Zoro his life. A really nice cask actually almost turns it around on Jackie. Gume's got the ultimate to work with right now, and watch if C9 try and overextend for this, especially because Hoon has the package. C9 definitely demonstrating some much needed restraint, as had they tried to dedicate themselves a little too hard for Gume, they would have lost even harder than they just did in the mid lane.
Right, and with that restraint, though, comes the consequences. They do drop that mid lane turret, so they're going to lose the pressure that they've already garnered here now. As we pull back, I am curious to see where the next rotations will come through. You've got a majority of Cloud9 sitting towards this top side, as Dragon now has been taken as a result. Maybe they're setting up for Baron, but I don't think this is the best angle to go.
Immortals have that dragon, that little bit of extra damage, and with the extra damage, with the ults almost all available, and with Yikes starting this Rift Herald, we're likely going to get to see a fight here, Zephyr. Yikes is looking for an angle in and ends up finding Niels on the side with the resonating strike. However, look at the counter engage again. Sharp gets a big taunt, and isn't enough for Cloud9.
Meals is just shredding through, but it's not enough. Can't quite step in that deep. Griff goes out to the back with that killer instinct, and they might just be all punished here. Meals, the final auto's gonna follow this one out on a Yikes, and it's a quick cleanup as we see the final resounding end for Tarzan there.
Griff is playing like a madman right now with an amazing counter engage from Charm. The only way that C9 could pull that play off is if they finally got an assassination with the Kaisa, and Griff is the one to do it, sitting only on the one item right now. When this guy resets, he's going to become an even more potent threat to the squishy members of Immortals, and I'm including Yikes in that as well. So many times we've seen Griff just trading blows with the Lee Sin, not a care in the world. It's him, it's Hoon, it's Gume that all need to be afraid, and Iraqi Zoro and Charm simply cannot protect you from both sides.
Well, for now, it's a little bit of the lull to pull back in this one before we see the next major objective here, but it does spell something good for Cloud9. If they're able to continue that dive potential up on Griff and support what they can there, I definitely could see this team playing back into it. Now, I will say that last team fight was in the presence of a major choke, and once they were not able to find that major engage that they wanted, whether it be through Iraqi Zoro's casket or Yikes getting deep, that's when the punishment came through. We talk about the river play. I think Immortals definitely still have a lot on their belt, as the tools will have much more access.
But they're going for an engage in the bot side, taking the tower right now. Immortals do normally struggle with being able to make these plays happen compositionally, but have they managed to make one happen this time? Tarzan, he's following up right now. He's going low, but he takes down Yikes before he falls himself, even getting out with the help of that Crescent Guard, and Charm goes on the re-engage.
Easy pickup here for the Immortals as they manage to get the full team in presence. Big props to Charms there, finding his way into the backline after the disengage that what was Cloud9's initial success to secure 2 to take it back into control here.
Attempted on the steal from Jackie. We're gonna find out if he got that Rift Scuttle. Yes, he did. Very nice, Jackie. I like that he keeps going for it. He's got the Dead Man's already, and on this Rakan hasn't been able to actually engage too many fights. A lot of times, it's been Immortals that are still doing it. Interestingly enough, with Charm in the front line, they've had a lot of multi-man taunts that you pointed out just in the bot lane right there, and that's been turning some fights and keeping them in the discussion for a team that can still close this one out. They've got that 5,000, almost 6,000 gold lead working for them, but again, are looking for more fights in that mid lane where Jackie is just not going to be able to participate.
Already done in the Sonic Wave to follow. Big flash from Charm. They're going to get the taunt off onto Meals there and secure the kill. Unable to find the last one that they need on Grift, as just barely he misses the take onto Yikes.
Griff is entirely the team fight for C9. If they're the ones on the front foot, if they've got a solid front line for this Kai'Sa, they can win, but we need that extra item spike to actually end up coming through, as right now Griff is still operating with just that Blade of the Ruined King completed, and it's much too late for that. Baron's already on the table, and you need to be able to carry team fights and even melt frontliners at this point. The Griff just does not have access to. We take a look at the other side. Gume does not have the same problem. It's double item, almost triple item completed for Hoon. He's already done with his third, and the tank line is so potent here with double items done on both Iraqi, Zoro, and Charm.
And already they turn it into another dragon on the board here. The setup is in favor for Cloud9. It looks like they've got a bit of a mix over towards the blue side there.
Package.
Finally, it's over the wall with the package. The burn into the flash. Yikesy to save the day with a great Dragon's range as Hoon sticks around. Now the Baron, the big thing to watch.
Impeccable Corki play as he manages to not only split the team fight, but get out of all of that without falling. Zello locks him in, but unfortunately, Hoon, he's just too tanky. He simply cannot be eliminated on the Corki. I love it. He played that amazingly. And if you take a look, he's going to have that stopwatch cooldown up again. Yikes, Hoon and Gume can all stall out fights for the other two big damage dealers to finish off kills, and that's something that Immortals cannot underappreciate right now. With such a huge amount of counter engage on their squad, their boot enchantments are feeding into exactly the way that the team fights need to go for them.
Right, and the craziest thing about that is that fight was so extended. We didn't get to actually see the very start of it, but there were 3 members here of Cloud9 all targeted out on Iraqi there towards the top side. But for now, maybe we're gonna just have to wait. Charm deep, a double taunt to behold. Zin's in, but a follow-up from Yikesy isn't enough to finish that one off. Sonic Wave and Griff there, unable to secure it, and not even the missile barrage. Still, damage is on the board, and this is going to prevent any of Cloud9 from defending these lanes out now.
In their own jungle, too. It's just so hard to play as Cloud9. But Gume, perhaps in a little bit of trouble, does have the ultimate available. Hoon did not have that invulnerability, though. He's low on mana. He's going to be taken down for an overextension of Immortals in the bot lane. They lose one, they lose a bit of that Baron, and they may lose a little bit more as well as Yikes tries to trade back onto Zello, and my lord, is almost able to.
Barely. Unable to find what he wants, but meanwhile, you put all of these guys towards your bot, and as a result, you lose everything in the top. They're not able to find that last tower in the defense, but it's enough to keep Cloud9 on their toes. So you may knock down one side, but the other is just waiting to pop right back up.
Immortals head back in off the resets, forced or not. They've still got some big item spikes to work with. I think that the ones that we have to be taking a look at on the other side, though, are, as always, Griffs, and now starting to be Meals. He's got the Lich Bane, he's got the Rod of Ages, and he's got the Rapid Fire Cannon. He's not only got damage, but he's got plenty of utility as well, with the Rabadons to back him up. This TF is starting to become a serious source of consistent DPS, and Charm may be finding out that Tarzan is too. Under his tower, does get a really nice taunt. There's a counter engage on the other side right now, but he's not there to back his team up. Comes in with that heroic entrance for the multi-man knockup, and you can never count Charm out. But with Gume just now arriving, Immortals are not going to be able to win that fight despite some immaculate play.
Well, not quite yet. Yikesy's back up. The feathers are landing here. Gume picking 1, 2, a casket to push Griff back. Now it's it for Meals, and as they keep this one routing forward, it's going to be a double on Gume.
I'm going to eat my words there. They shouldn't have been able to win that fight, but C9, they end up sticking around for long enough that things end up working out. The GA on Yikes pays off in spades, and now, with 15 seconds left on the fastest of respawns, it might be time for Immortals to end the game off that one crucial misstep from C9.
One major take going deep into that jungle, and it doesn't pay off. As a result, you lose the first game of the series here. And honestly, I'm shocked. For a second, I thought Cloud9 had worked that one out in their favor.
they were definitely working up to it. We talked about Meals and the item specs that he was hitting. Griff was playing pretty amazingly as well on the Kaisa, and the fact that they're not able to close out the game is less due to the fact that they didn't have the items to do it, that they weren't powerful enough, and more to the fact that there was a small misstep there at the end, and that's gonna happen. It's something that Cloud9 cannot get themselves down about, because in a best of 3, every game matters, and there's so few of them to work with that you suffer another loss to Immortals and you're already out. It's not best of 5. You can't continue to sort of have the slow path back to mental stability here. C9 have to get themselves ready, say, you know what? One misplay at the end there doesn't really matter. We know that we can take this one, turn it into a win again. Just got to calm down, because I did really like the strat from C9. I think that they could have used a little bit more consistent DPS for how they wanted to play. The Twisted Fate seemed really underwhelming, as Meals was never able to effectively split the map. And again, it's not their fault. If they don't want to play that way, if they don't feel comfortable playing that way, you shouldn't be forced to.
Yeah, exactly. And giving him a little bit more presence will definitely help the map kind of equal out, because what they did put here in towards their bot and, well, no, we'll just stick around with the bot here. What became of Griff on that Kai'Sa was definitely a problem. The issue was it didn't really have the timing to become something that more stable here for the game as a whole. We take a look back towards its comparison, Gume on the Xayah, and you talk about the presence held with the extra advantage with the item spikes coming out much earlier on with these major team fights on the board. There was so much room to play around. That last one, that misstep where they go too far forward, that's when Gume arrived to the fight, and that's when it broke down here for Cloud9.
And this Xayah was such a crucial part of how Immortals wanted to play the fight, absorbing the pressure from C9. And I feel like C9, while they recognized their own win conditions, weren't recognizing those of their enemies. Immortals want to play a fight that is extended, that does push into them. Even when it looks really good for you as Cloud9, I think that it's an extra bit of risk, especially at the tail end when death timers are so long. But Cloud9 had a composition that, again, was really good at splitting the map, was really good at, I guess, in the sense of Immortals saying, you don't have any engaged, so I guess we just won't fight you. Charm did amazingly, however.
Yes.
As I say they didn't have engaged. They shouldn't have had engaged. Charm made it look like Galio was engaged, as he was getting consistently inside of C9's jungle. 2-man, 3-man taunts, constantly finding responses, and able to make great use of the heroic entrance.
Right, and eventually when he got to the point where he was far too tanky and the damage was not scaled appropriately for Cloud9, there was nothing they could do. You saw them. They sat towards that top side and tried to capitalize out of his misposition in the jungle in some fashion, and there was literally no damage to take on this man. And so quickly undeterred, after Tarzan had chased him out, he turned around, grand slam, heroic entrance to finish and start the end of that game.
Yeah, really amazing from Charm as always. And a question that we had coming into this game was off the draft, where C9 denied so much from Charm, and yet ultimately we're still unable to shut him down. Will they have that same focus on him this time, or will their focus be more about enabling their jungler? Because Tarzan looked really good, but we've definitely seen Tarzan look better, especially when he's got support from his lanes. I think a big problem for them this time was that the Groggs was up in the top lane, neutralizing Camille's push. The same thing was happening in the mid lane, of Corki able to match Twisted Fate, especially early on, with some support from the Lee Sin, and Immortals were able to roam around, and even in that early game, take down Tarzan on an invade that he had started. That's going to be a big problem, especially for C9, as their game plan is so jungle-centric.
Right, and the fact of the matter is you're not giving him that winning lane. That's the best way to summarize that output there. When you put everyone on such a foot that requires mid-game, late scaling to have real presence into just team fights as a whole, yes, Tarzan can be the pillar that puts a carry on its pedestal, but that's your win con. You typically play around this man, and yes, it looked great when you got what was that Corki head there in the quarterfinals. But there have been many games where it, like you said, is that Tarzan wheel, and it just keeps spinning round and round.
Yeah, you've got to find some way of enabling him, and I think that the biggest thing that they can do right now is get him some pushing lanes. What I'd really like to see, given how Cloud9 started off the day with the priority on Twisted Fate and hoping that that'll translate into a winning 2v2 alongside the Xin Zhao, is perhaps take an alternate route and go with the Ziggs, because the Ziggs gives you the opportunity to push out your lane consistently in the early game, has a little bit of global pressure with the ultimate, although it's not as potent as Twisted Fates, but most importantly, will lay out a lot of consistent damage in the early and mid game, while still allowing you to 2v2 effectively because of the push that he gets quite early on with that minefield.
Well, for now, we're going to put that on hold as we approach what could potentially be our final game here of this best of 3. Cloud9 v Immortals, the bans are coming out, and they don't look too different. We still have heavy presence put towards that center, Rakan, the Viego. There's nothing else out there.
Sorry, just very quickly. Thresh is banned away. It's Varus Thresh on Cloud9.
Oh, my
and
apologies.
Oh, good. I was like, wait a minute. We got Senna Rakan on the other side. So Immortals, interestingly enough, banning away their own Rakan is a odd decision. I suspect it's because they want to go with a similar first pick that, of course, was not the Rakan last time. And they ended up taking away the Ashe as well. If I didn't know better, I would say that these sides were flipped right now, because Immortals seem like they're taking away their own champion picks.
Right, Immortals typically plays through the bot side, so okay, to confirm, this is a bit of a swap. I was confused as well. Usually we see the Ashe and the presence of that center Rakan being a major thing you want to route away from Immortals, so make sure that's on y'all's minds.
Well, as we're moving further into the draft, we're swapping up the sides now. I'm really glad that the bands actually revealed it to us as we started sort of preempting that. It is Cloud9 to take away the Ashe and the Rakan, even the Senna alongside it, and Immortals now are left with their final choice. Because that Rakan is removed, they're likely going to have to go with something like the Galio again, unless Cloud9 want to take it away. But again, I feel like the focus towards Charm didn't pay off in game 1. You got to take a little bit of a different route. I'd like to see a really strong pushing laner locked in here, but they just double down with the Corki. An interesting choice, to be sure.
I personally like the Corki here on the board. I think for Meals, this is kind of at least solving the problem you have brought up. It is very early on, so could be counter-picked out, but it has the presence enough to prevent that lane from becoming such a wash like we saw out of the Twisted Fate. So giving Tarzan now that length to extend upon and actually maybe potentially find something is a valuable win condition for them to work with. Immortals on the other side are quick to pick up the slack, and this time they reintroduce that Nami we've been waiting for.
I really like the Nami pick. I think it's extraordinarily versatile, and I'm so excited to see Charm play it, especially when backed up by the Camille, who, again, can be flexed between the jungle and the top lane. I think she's an extraordinary jungler, as we've already seen in the past day, with the ability to engage from very long range, find those early ganks. Immortals can try and challenge the jungle just by outpacing quite early on. Cloud9 take the opposite side here. They go with that Xayah and the Leona for a pretty heavy engage into Nami during the early stages of the lane, and really at all points during the game, especially with the Solar Flare. You're able to answer a lot.
Right, and this time around, they shift the dive out of the hands here of Griff. We saw him back on that Kai'Sa in game 1, which was potent. Don't get me wrong, but it definitely puts him in a worse position than you would really want to be as an AD carry, especially if you're not directly ahead for the time being. So putting those engage tools, of course, on that Leona, the presence allows you to have much more of a field to play around in terms of team fights and not really risking it all, given that Xayah is, of course, one of the safest AD carry marksmen that you can work with.
Immortals are likely going to pick up their own AD carry here as well, and I really like that they take the Orianna early on to more or less stall that out, but still get themselves a source of consistent damage. It's going to have wave clear into the Corgi, but does double down into a team fight win con. And interestingly enough, Immortals need some more time to consider what sorts of AD carries they want to run alongside this. They've got the Xin Zhao now instead. Cloud9 are going to be left with something else to focus on, especially when it comes to that jungler.
All right, and you've already pulled away what is that Zen. The Lee Sin is still up and available, ready for Tarzan to work out. If you want to push out what is the already strong engaged potential that you're working with, that is personally what I would like to see here. Past that, though, we start looking at Immortals win comp here, and they've got a lot of tools to settle these fights before they even begin. We talk about the Wombo, the Lockdown. These are major tools that will crush anybody out of position.
Cloud9 still waiting on those last 2 picks right now. I'm worried, to be frank, about how they're going to respond to this. I think the Olaf is actually a really nice pickup that's sort of flown under the radar right now. It mitigates a lot, but the Kennen is a very surprising pick. Last, I do not see this a lot. The Ezreal from Immortals is really good to answer into this as well. With the Olaf and the Kennen, Cloud9 do show their full hand, saying we do want to access your backline, especially with our front. And it's not so much of a game of peel for the Xayah as it is take down the enemies in a Wombo combo for the ages.
Right, and we actually haven't had the pleasure of really seeing this Olaf. I want y'all to know that this has been heavily banned out in this tournament thus far in and against Cloud9. So apparently it holds a lot of pressure, and I can definitely understand it. The Wombo that I just brought up, the potential where you are unable to find what you want in terms of flexibility here out of Immortals is completely negated by the fact that you can work with the Ragnarok in your favor here. So to see that one slide through, it definitely pumps me up because I am curious to see what the monster that lies within Tarzan actually looks like.
And this is, Tarzan specifically is the one thing, I think it's actually him and Jackie that can threaten Immortals right now, because Immortals have a composition that, while it does want to team fight, while it's perfectly happy doing so, doesn't have as nearly strong of a team fight or as easy to execute of a team fight as Cloud9 do, where the front line is sort of press R and run at you, everybody else can back you up and throw in the autos. Yeah, it seems very, very simple, at least at surface level. Immortals have some counterplay to that inside of their own team fight, but more importantly, they have something Cloud9 doesn't, and it's the ability to split push really effectively with the Camille that we now know is going to go into the top side. They've got a really powerful 4-man core as well, especially with the Xin Zhao for a little bit of counter engage and space, being with the Crescent Guard to only take damage from those that are basically right next to him. Ezreal and Orianna can provide a lot of safety as well. So a big part of this, I think, my curiosity lies in, for Immortals, can you effectively now play that 1-4 that you've set yourselves up for that is really strong for you, especially once Camille hits those 2 or 3 item breakpoints?
And I think that is something that begs the question of how Immortals will work this one out for themselves, given that they were capitalized on in some major chokes. We talk about overextension here, actually from the point of Cloud9 getting very, very deep in there, and sometimes it was effectively punished out, but there were many of none that they were able to find what they wanted, giving access to, say, someone like Rift, launching deep into that backline, finding them so outspaced there. If Immortals are able to do this one again, I definitely think it can work, but you have to worry about so much on the field here. If you go in a bit too far, there are so many options for Cloud9 to capitalize.
Actually, 2 big questions here. I mean, one is Cloud9, when are they going to actually pull the trigger on engage? Because they did have the option to do so a lot last game, but weren't actually the ones that were initiating a lot of the cross-map plays. A lot of times it was engage in response to something Immortals had already set up, but if you can be proactive as Cloud9, I think their composition is really strong. Another big question that I have for Immortals on the other side of that is, with Charm not on an engaged champion, what are you going to look like? We've only really seen him on the Rakan and the Galio, and perhaps this looks like an Immortals roster, compositionally and with Charm and Minami, that doesn't want to engage so much. And I'm curious to see if everybody's on the same page about that, because it's a big shift in style from game 1 to 2.
I think it's okay, though. I think to pull back and kind of level the field with a bit more of a calm storm doesn't really route towards their win condition that they usually play through, but I think it's necessary. When we look at what Cloud9 has provided in terms of that kind of trigger you're talking about pulling, it is a hair one, right? We're a second away from that bullet firing, and it will hurt. Giving giving Immortals the presence to work through Gume and Charm, having the sustain, the peel, the presence to pull away when necessary, definitely helps them survive. It makes me question whether they're going to be able to capitalize and finish these fights out, but it definitely puts them in a better place than their usual hard, aggressive forward tendencies.
Now, as we pop into the game very shortly, I want to sort of very quickly recap. The heroes that I'm looking at for Cloud9 are definitely Jackie and Tarzan right now. We've got a lot of power coming from the top lane with the Kennen, but it's up to the Olaf and the Leona to be the ones that start that fight and that can effectively frontline. We've got the possibility for Cloud9 to find some flanks, but it's really up to those two. Immortals on the other side, my big question going into this one is, of course, what do they look like with Charm on the Nami, and whether they're going to be looking for engages with somebody like Iraqi Zoro this time instead.
Well, for now here, there's nothing too crazy this time around. You don't quite have that early engage that stunted the growth right off the bat of Cloud9. So definitely more happy to see this one. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
With Tarzan starting over here in the bot side, he can be spotted out by a little bit of vision that Immortals have laid down. A lot of the early game going to be about tracking the Olaf, making sure that he isn't able to pull some of the early triggers on those ganks. The same thing, of course, responded to with Meals able to lay down the hurt and the vision in the mid lane. So Yikes' early pathing going to be mitigated too. However, both of these once again showing up to try and make sure that they've not only got pressure here, they've got that additional push. But yeah, they're ready for the 2v2. It doesn't normally result in too much.
Well, you do see Yikes slam in there, and the damage that follows through from Cloud9 is enough to be pressing, but it's so quick. Hoon with an explosive burst there. The slow from Yikes is going to put Meals down, but a nice heal from the Honey Fruit allows for Cloud9 to find the return.
Hoon gets a little bit spicy there, but I can't say that I don't like it. You gotta look for it occasionally, and Immortals do get the 1-for-1. Importantly, both kills going onto the mid laner, but Meals able to stick around just that little bit longer. Does take the reset to get those items pushed back into the mid lane. Lost Chapter going to be picked up for Hoon, however, giving a lot more sustain, and the Scuttle Crab going over to C9 because it has a small advantage for them in the jungle pressure game that we've talked about being so important for C9's gameplay.
You know what? C9 is on a different set here, and it definitely stems from their draft that gives them the tools to engage, but they play around that early super duper well. They know they hold presence right now. They know that even where they currently stand, they can work with what Mortals has and take advantage of that. So the fact that they route the full roster, can pull what is that Scuttle Crab into their favor, just is testing Immortals as it stands, because they know they can't step up. They know they can't quite pull the trigger yet. They've got to wait to scale. I'd like to see them transition that into some additional kills, but it definitely shows that they're on the right path.
With Yikes hanging around the bot lane, I know that Immortals would really like to get something going, but they don't have the minion wave to do so. So Yikes is going to have to back off right now. Tarzan invading on the other side is going to be able to get a lot of early pressure. And already, there's a big difference between this game and the last, just with the amount of autonomy that Tarzan has had and the amount of wave push that is available to him to make sure that he's backed up on this. With Meals arriving back into the lane now, has the crit cloak, has the Caulfield's. He's going to be able to push out and support him on that roam up. And Tarzan is picking up a lot of farm that should never have been his right now, and you can see it starting to impact the gold. And now, with the red buff going his way, this is really big.
This is heavy, but it's not quite gonna go free. You've got Iraqi and Yikesy on the hunt here, but that Ragnarok is such an explosive tool to turn around, slicing Maelstrom in as even Meals has come out to play here. They can't quite find those kills, but oh my gosh, Jackie's on the rotation as well. You've got all 4 members of Cloud9 searching here.
I think it's really nice awareness from C9 and from Jackie especially to give up a little bit of presence in the lane to back up his jungler. Tarzan, however, has already gotten out, so we can back off now because we got that Rift Herald coming up in 6 seconds. It can't be picked off for that, as Immortals have themselves in a spot that suggests to me that they would really like that objective this time around, see if they can get themselves a little bit more tower plating going, especially once that one gets taken down by all 4 members that have rotated up. It does come at a cost, however, as Gume rotating up is giving a lot of free time to Griff in the bot lane.
Yeah, definitely giving the presence over to C9 to find the gold where they want it. It's not too crazy as of yet, but we talk about Xayah being that scaling presence. The safety for Cloud9 to play around is definitely something you don't want out there just yet. Now that Rift is down, but they didn't quite trade it for anything, but a quick response from Jackie and the flash over the wall. Yikesi's out for now, but look, just that alone is something scary you have to worry about.
I really like the way that C9 have been playing this game. However, of course, where there is pressure, you're always losing a little bit, and Immortals are taking full advantage of that, much like Cloud9 did earlier, giving Iraqi a little bit more of the gold. He's coming out pretty far ahead of the Ken right now. Zello is not going to be able to re-enter the lane without a little bit of trouble given to him by Charm, who's still playing really aggressively on this Nami. Turret goes down in the favor of the split-pushing Camille, and now Immortals are the ones that can start tearing apart that map. But you gotta look out because C9 are piling into the bot lane.
Big dive coming through here from C9, and they pick up an easy kill right there onto Yikesy, and I'm glad that they do this. They show that they have the way, how, and knowledge, knowing that they're losing out such a heavy pressure gap on that top side, the big first turret down being that impact, and they turn it around very quickly. I would have liked to see them push forward, maybe even find Hoon as well, but just this alone to pressure into this turret as well is enough to balance the favors. Ooh, but Charm
going to be evened up off of that. I don't think Charm is going to be able to.
This sucks. Charm's not on those engaged camps.
Okay, wait. Oh, okay, the tidal wave, yeah. Hey, I'm thinking similarly to you that it would have been really nice to see, of course, the Rakan, but plays the Nami relatively well, almost gets the kill, does extend the exhaust, of course, and with C9 bot lane getting out scot-free. Our attention is going to return to how the side lanes start to play out, especially with both of those tier 1s in both the Baron and Dragon lanes having gone down. Camille got a lot of free space, and Xayah is pretty darn far ahead with already the Infinity Edge completed, working on the second item right now. Two Trinity Forces, though, mean the Immortals think they're spiking hard, but the flash away from Iraqi Zoros he thinks better of engaging into 4 is definitely a well-advised one.
Seeing Jackie there absolutely scared that man out of his wits there, but not enough as they find their way on to Zello. Going to go down. Jackie's in deep with that Zenith Blade. The flash has to come through, though, as the damage is a pumping here from the Immortals. Quickly, Iraqi Zoro is to follow Griff, tries to feather this one out. The Ragnarok now out on the field here, but no kills to behold. Rift will finally fall, but it's at the expense of 1 and a turret here.
And even without that flash, Iraqi Zoro is so scary as he jumps forward and is able to initiate another fight entirely, backed up by the rest of the team. And the initiation onto Zello, of all people, means that C9 cannot respond. But yikes, overstaying might have been a problem. We've got Iraqi Zoro waiting to cover him on the way out, and Scuttlecrab should go their way as well.
He stole the blue buff, found his way over the wall, took that one away from Tarzan there. So now putting that one a little on the back, but it's not that huge, but it definitely pushes the gold once now back in the favor of Yikesy, which surprisingly has been back and forth this entire game between these two junglers.
And with Griff being able to push out against Iraqi Zoro, he's got a little bit of backup, but this is an interesting meeting of the two win conditions as they're being set up right now. Iraqi Zoro is definitely at risk with not a whole lot of vision coverage when it comes to the Leona, who's suffering right behind the Xayah, but they've got plenty in the river, and Immortals feel comfortable enough to initiate this one onto Zello. They know Jackie's on the way. Yikes has full information right now and has the ball on him. The threat of the shockwave is going to be enough that C9 do not push forward for that kill. Watch Tarzan, however, as he's playing a totally different game, other end of the map, as Meals with that package is just barely able to take himself to safety.
And now they've lost complete priority out here from the mid. They're going to be able to extend that one forward towards the Rift Herald, putting that one in their pocket. So now 2 of those major objectives to play out with. We talked about 4-1. It could be 5 if you just work with the Rift.
Definitely. I'm expecting, I'll say, that there's a 5-man engage here as Immortals do have a little bit of a gold advantage that I'm sure that they feel right now, especially with the way that their items are stacking up. Double items just completed on Hoon, and Gume working towards his second. I think that once that one comes in, if it's ahead of the timing of Immortals, we see that fight be taken 10 times out of 10, as Immortals are already looking over by this Dragon. Ragnarok is going to get popped, and Jack is taken to the front line.
Can't quite find the Ragnarok that he wants. That's a big window down and out here for Tarzan now. It's a response with that true shot barrage, and the dragon being up might spell for weakness. Yikes sees deep, but a good stun in response. The shockwave will make sure that they secure at least one in turn, but look at how low C9 here is. Gume now stepping up, a quick shot away, trying to land what is those final ebbs and flows of the energy, able to find what he needs here onto Zello, but that is going to be it for them. Oh, maybe not. They'll look potentially for the dive. You got to be careful there.
2 games in a row, we go, C9 are done, but Immortals continue running forward. Riff and Meals both super low, though, means that they cannot stick around. They lose not only this bot lane tower, but also likely the dragon, as it's just now that Zello is respawning, moving his way towards that objective, but it's not going to be nearly in time, as the heals from Charm over time are really starting to stack up, and Immortals don't have to move anywhere because they can continue taking these sort of longer engagements, these longer poke wars, and coming out on top with the Ezreal Nami.
Right, we talk about the absolute burst necessary to make this Cloud9 comp work, and it hasn't been finding its right footing here. Tarzan, especially in that last fight, we saw that Ragnarok so early, but the extent of, say, something like those heals we just discussed coming out of Charm puts you at such a back foot here. If they are able to find that one pick that they need, I can definitely see it working out for them, but as this game goes on longer and longer, and you see stuff like Gume start coming out onto the Rift, it's going to be harder and harder to find that burst.
There's one big amendment that I think C9 needs to make to the game plan, and I know it's a very difficult one, so you take it with a grain of salt, but to see a Zello on a flank, I think would be really, really nice for them. I think traditionally, Cannon does really well with the off angles, and it's difficult to find them. However, the fact that the Slicing Maelstrom has been finding, at times, just single targets has really been hampering them in the team fights when compared to the fact that Immortals can continually press those go buttons. However, as we're walking around, I think it is worth noting that that one go button didn't exactly go their way. Rakizoro does go down, does take Meals with him.
Already out now for the 4v4 here. Balance this one out, but you're going to pay the price. Meals being heavier of the presence. It isn't the engage tool that you usually utilize from the worlds, but they still have Yikesy to work with if there's going to be that extended fight. But something I want to touch on, especially since we talk about flanks and the presence of Zello on this Kennen, the Immortals have done such a good job of controlling these areas in the source of vision and what information they have. Right now, it may not look too hot here around the Baron, but when we look back towards that dragon, which they were able to sustain that original fight, they had that jungle lit up like a Christmas tree.
That's another really important part of the game, of course, the vision that Immortals are really laying down right now. It's getting a lot of safety for Rakizoro, as we once again can see that he's well covered inside of C9's own blue side jungle, with the Rift Herald summoned in the mid lane. However, we are going to likely be getting Immortals splitting the map a bit. They haven't got any objectives to play around while this one charges in, and it means that to make the most of it, they've kind of got to commit to a mid lane push. Zoro's hanging around to try and find a pick before that one goes off, and he engages onto Zello, who's going to be able to play around just at the edges right now. Shelly making her presence felt in the mid lane right now. We'll likely get that single charge off, and we'll see if Immortals choose to do anything after that.
Well, Shelly's already down and out here. They're trying to find the turret that they can, but that's that Ragnarok we see all the way far forward, and it's straight onto Charm, the one who's keeping your team healthy. Slicing Maelstorms deep, but it's not finding the stuns you want. A quick two-shot barrage shreds this team. The fight ensues as they continue deeper. Tarzan, Jackie paying the price as Gume continues to beam this one down off of the kite. Meals the next one to fall, and a full wipe here as Immortals take the lead.
That was almost a quadra kill from Gume, playing out of his mind, and you can see why they picked the Ezreal Nami so early on. Yes, Charm falls very quickly, but Immortal's able to peel so much time from that the Ragnarok expires, and the damage has been dealt. C9 have to commit so far forward with a Xayah whose forte it is not to run at you. It's much better at absorbing when you are running at her, and with that, Immortals are able to slowly but surely whittle out a lead for themselves in a fight that should otherwise have been C9's.
it kind of feels bad here, but that disengage that we talked about in draft has finally come back to bite. It held a lot of presence in the early game as well, from preventing Cloud9 from really accelerating their major carries, but now it's even worse. You can barely get what was, say, even that slicing Maelstrom where you want it, which was probably the most punishing fight of that team fight. You had a strong engage from Tarzan, found what you want onto Charm, but the quick response and the inability to find those stuns definitely came out there.
And with 2 members of Cloud9 missing, both in the top lane and the bot lane, there's no real answer that can come in as their tier 2 continues to be pushed past and into the inhibitor tower, falling below half HP now off of a single minion wave that was pushed in by Immortals. Hoon's going to be able to continue to clear out the minion waves for right now, set them up for success as they split the map as expected, using the power of Iraqi Zoro on this Camille. But one good shockwave would end the game. One good pick from Iraqi Zoro will break the base, and that is definitely going to be the consequence here.
Right off the bat, you don't have the cannon to play around, and the map is even worse than split. You give full right for Iraqi Zoro to continue pushing this one out. Meanwhile, your mid lane is falling. Yikesy, Hoon, Charm, they're all face forward, waiting for these waves to crash here. Tarzan may know that this is the only chance they have to respond, but a good Charm bubble keeps him in place.
No Ragnarok just yet. We'll have it off cooldown in round 3, 2. There it is. And Tarzan can now start to fast tank, but unfortunately he's already below half HP. And with the mid lane inhibitor tower missing, the top lane inhibitor tower missing, Immortals are going to be able to back off lickety split. And even though they lose Gume, they definitely get what they came for, as the base of C9 is in tatters.
Well, at least you consolidate the team you're running against now. That's at least the one benefit I can play out here for Cloud9. If there's a fight and it's going to be taken, it will either be around one of these major objectives or, Christ, right around that nexus there. So if there's one potential outcome that could come true, maybe the collapsed effort of this team will play against them, giving maybe Zalo that chance we've been waiting for.
That would be really exciting. However, it seems like Tarzan is going to get that same opportunity as he pops the Ragnarok, tries to trade back onto Gume, but is all alone in the bot side river, disrespecting, I think, the engaged range of Iraqi Zoro. With that pick going down, and with the Dragon lanes at tier 2 yet to have been cracked, Immortals are once again going to split that map, applying pressure to the top side and leaving Iraqi Zoro in a kingdom of his own in the Dragon lane.
This is definitely a poor place to be in. You can't even root what is that cannon down there anymore. He can't take that 1v1 or the 1v none at this point, given that the most of these teams are completely wished onto that side altogether. They actually stem what is Yikesy out towards that top side, potentially in preparation for what will be, of course, that Baron. Yeah.
And with Iraqi Zoro down here, with Tarzan not even having respawned yet, it is a no-brainer objective for them to take. Hoon's going to be able to guard pretty darn well using the Orianna, and there's no question that Iraqi Zoro is perfectly safe down there in the Dragon lane, has the vision to back him up as well, and with the teleport to seal the deal, they can even start a team fight right now. Jackie's caught out on his own, doesn't have any backup, and Charm is able to back up Iraqi Zoro on the other side. You have Yikes going forward, but the team fight is entirely split. And even still, Tarzan, exhausted, cannot do anything about it. Gume, however, may fall, uses that stopwatch just in time, and O'Meals finds the kill. He's going to go down himself. The stun and the ensuing auto from Iraqi Zoro. The death timers are so long that once again, off of a fight in the jungle, C9 are going to be saying goodbye, and Immortals will move themselves on to the finals.
Immortals find their way out here to those finals to compete for what will be those major qualification points, but it absolutely sucks for that one there. Cloud9 had spelled out what was going to be their particular win condition, but they just couldn't quite pull the trigger early enough, and once the scaling came through, we talk about that disengage. It was such a hand-heavy presence here from the Immortals.
I gotta say, I'm really impressed with the level of Wild Rift that they have demonstrated. I think that this is a really exciting matchup that we're going to get in the finals. Of course, the other side of it's still to be determined, but C9, especially in the early stages of that game, showed us what they were made of, and I loved the priority that was not only given to Tarzan by Meals and Zello, but by Jackie, who was constantly on the roam. C9 definitely have the makings of a squad that could take down Immortals. Yeah. We already No, the question. I want to see this matchup. I want to see them return in the qualifiers again, so that we can see how these teams continue to evolve. Because C9 are so close. It's just in that mid game they just didn't quite have it.
Well, it's even more impressive out of Immortals, because not just that C9 didn't quite have it, but the Immortals were playing something completely different aside from what they usually like to root through. We talk about Charm being heavy presence, engage, Gume on those hard scalings, deep dive 80 carries. They had to play for peel. They had to play around the fact that Cloud9 had strong engage, just waiting to pull it that one out here. So the fact that they still were able to find victory while switching that one up shows promise of an absolutely excellent team past just this match alone.
And Iraqi Zoro shows us he can not only dominate lane as he showed us in the quarterfinals, but that he can also be a really big source of engage for the team. Of course, Charm playing the support in a more traditional way, making sure that he's going to be okay. I thought it was an incredible game. I can't wait for the finals, but we do have one more semi to cover before that. It's going to be coming up in just a few minutes. RiftMasters is going to resume. We just got to take a very quick break, get our teams set up before the second semifinals matchup. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Wild Rift semifinals over here at Rift Masters. It is the 30K event, and already in the first qualifier, we have been going absolutely crazy. Semifinals on one side of the bracket have already been proven to be very exciting, with Immortals advancing themselves to the finals. However, Naguara versus Chonk Chortle is going to be another story for the ages, as we already know these two squads incredibly talented, and I'm excited to see yet another pretty heavy jungle presence game from Chonk Chortle. But you, Zephyr, I know, talked to Naguara, who were not on stream yesterday, and for those viewers that were not able to catch their games in some other form, what are we going to be expecting from them?
Right, and honestly, I personally think this is going to be one of the more stronger matchups things, so don't just throw this one away. Immortals Cloud9 is fun to watch too, but this one can be just as good, and they're playing through something just as similar, a strong, aggressive jungler in the presence of Lee Xing here. And while, yes, they have a primary carry being serious in that mid lane, that kind of combo is something that we'll have to watch and wait for. But surprisingly, against all of that, their major shot caller is the support Arvo there, which in sense makes, it does make sense. He typically plays what is those major engages to work with. So as we work our way into draft, keep all those in mind, but that in particular.
And it's interesting to see that reflected in the draft, or rather the lack of reflection in the draft for Naguara, as they end up going with a Renekton, a really strong R1, gets you what should be a winning lane in most scenarios, but gives up a lot of the more egregious power picks, things like Rakan, things like, in this case, the Corki to the other side. Draft's going pretty fast, though, and we've got a Xayah and Nami to respond to that. So a strong bot lane combo, and specifically into the Rakan, one that Naguara have to feel comfortable playing, because Rakan can and will decimate you once you get that level 5.
But at least they have the level of safety to work with. The damage is definitely something that's a big question in the air here, but I hope it's answered when we start looking towards this mid jungle right now. Granted, that Xayah's going to scale up and hold presence eventually, but for now here, it is a bigger issue. For the response, though, Chonk Chortle, they're giving us that hard presence that we quite literally almost just identically saw right out of semifinals, loving that split push presence, as well as the Xiao being such an aggressive take for your early game.
I love the Fiora as well. I know that we talked about, the split push win conditions, how fun it is and how difficult it is to pull off, with Chonk Chortle getting themselves a Black Camel on the Xin Zhao for a heck of a lot of engage, and a Fiora to distract from all that. I think it's really good. Don't be baited in, Zephyr. That's a jungle Riven.
That's a jungle Riven? I'm baited in already, but I don't. I really wanted to see this go. It's fine. It's fine. It still works out for me either way here. I am curious to see what Lee Xing does on it, if it is pulled out in that direction, but still seeing that pulled through with its presence is awesome. What is more remarkable is that they decide to put Twisted Fate in the hands here of Sirius. And that's really big in my opinion, because that goes out on a limb and says, yes, we don't just play around Sirius, but Sirius is our everything here. He's not only going to win that lane and take us to victory, but he's also going to accelerate the growth of all of us around.
Yeah, that's going to be really exciting to watch, of course, with the fact that now you have some at least answer to the Fiora with this Twisted Fate. I do find myself doubting whether it's going to be enough, though, because Twisted Fate, well, he can be in a side lane. As to whether he can actually duel Fiora, it's a lot more difficult. And it's not just Fiora that he's going to have to go up against, because we've got an Aurelia locked in as well. Corki's going to be rotated down to the bot lane, and an Aurelia that has been banned away so often in these qualifiers is going to be unleashed into another side lane. Chonk Chortle can play a 1-3-1 here, and that's a composition that we see extraordinarily infrequently because it is so hard to execute.
Right, but they have two major power picks. That's why it does come out here. That's what Chonk Chortle is looking to work with, and the fact that they also pair Corki being that mid gives them the presence to rush this one down through and through. For now, though, that's their win condition, and the Rift will spell it potentially the same or maybe differently here as we work our way into Game 1.
And with Naguara already looking for a cheeky little pick, they're not going to find anything just yet, but they will be able to lay down a little bit more pressure that we often see come in for these ranged mid laners that should have push. You get it to them even earlier, and you don't miss that much CS on the way back down.
a very wild take here. They clear that mid lane with the presence that they hold, and they give the opportunity to pull back here for Sirius to get that extra information. So keeping a watch on Camel, we didn't really get the opportunity to talk about it, but Chunk Chortle explicitly played through Camel yesterday in the 4 matches that we did have the opportunity to see on stream. So the fact that they want to keep presence is showing me that Naguara have paid great attention to this matchup already.
And they're doing it at the expense of Sirius. I know that it seems small, but with everybody showing up in the mid lane, they split the experience, giving a lot of it into the side lanes. Jack Locky is going to be able to hit the level 2 first. Now equalized, of course, the same thing happened in the top lane, and it's these small advantages for the side lanes that come at the cost of some mid lane success. For a squad that is really hyped up, amped up on their carry in the mid lane, who is going to need him to be relevant later on, especially in the side lane, it does make me a little bit worried. However, something that everybody's opted into. Everybody on Naguara knows what's happening, and they're continuing with the game plan as per usual. Both sides trading scuttle crabs now. No early ganks, no early kills coming out just yet.
Well, sadly here on the other end, they couldn't quite find those kills, which is definitely big to pull, but they didn't quite find any kind of rotation that they wanted either. And I'll tell you what, as it kind of moves forward, your bot lane's not going to be something that you can really play into here. If you're Chonk Chortle, you're not really going to find those major kills on Jack Locky or Arvo, since they have so much safety in their own right. And Sirius himself seems to be playing this from a more weak side angle, and it doesn't look like it's going to be, well, then I just should shut my mouth. They find it anyways.
Weak side is right. Like, Sirius really has no agency there, and unfortunately does end up burning down to the ignite that Aurelia took. Black Camel, however, is wrapping around on the top side, looking for a potential engage, as he knows that Lee Zing has been sitting up here for ages on the Riven, applying a lot of pressure to Luan. Hasn't cost him too much in the gold just yet, but with the early reset coming in, there's a chance that it costs him in the experience, as these minions will crash against the tier 1 tower, and Hitman's going to get his back of choice.
Well, for now here, no major win condition has worked itself out. I was hoping for maybe a little bit more early presence, maybe out of Hitman here, but we're just going to wait and see. Once that Dominus comes online, that could spell something different, but given the sustain you usually find on these Furas, I don't think it will truly spell that well. Either way, I think it evens up the lane. But when we come to that kind of mid-late game presence, the Fiora has much more of a daunting impact, especially if they keep splitting these fights. You talk about that 1-3-1 maybe going to make its major take. That's going to be difficult to play in with the Renekton.
And in the early game already, with the level 5s coming through, these two side laners, in quotes, end up getting a big boost. The Aurelia and the Fiora both have extremely potent combat ultimates that go with them. Sirius does not. The big potent combat, or the big potent ultimate from Sirius comes when he goes into the side lane, and, Hitman, even his, I don't think is going to end up working here, although he does get a stun. We'll see if this ends up working out for him. He popped that barrier already, and Luan ends up ditching as he knows that there's some support coming in the form of Arvo on the Nami, already having left that bot lane long ago, moving back towards the dragon now. It seems like this is going to be a trade with Chonk Chortle opting into the Rift Herald.
Oh, this goes to show what I was saying, though. You had the presence, you had the time to potentially pull something off with Hitman up there, but it's just something that will stem out worse and worse for the time being. But for now, though, does find a little bit of trades that he can, gets that sustain off there, but he has to be careful. Out in the sidelines, Camel could wait. Ooh, fight Yeska breaking out in the bot
right now, but yeah, with Arvo already down, it seems like we got a little bit of greed from Naguara trying to find an engage on the back of that dragon. They do end up still taking it, but with Chonk Chortle actually able to find themselves not just the Rift Herald, but also a kill around the Drake. It's a play in their favor, and it's not just that, but it's a big one, and one that's continued to stack up, as now they've got about 1,000 gold in their favor. A lot of it off the back of Luan having some alone time in this top lane.
Well, given that, not just to Luan, but look at the major discrepancy found here on Fat Cat. This Irelia we talked about being such a strong pick that has not shown up for the majority of these qualifier rounds. Now being allowed to slide through has become a problem. I'm telling you right now, it is a problem, and it will be hard to defend against. Already Fat Cat is on this bot side playing around what will be the constant push and strife that we discussed during draft.
1-3-1's already happening, and now the question is, what can you do to stop it? Because you can't put Sirius in a lane against Fat Cat, and you can't leave him alone against Luan. You gotta have backup here, and already, it is not you that has backup instead, it is Fat Cat. He's getting a lot of love from Chonk Chortle. Redemption's gonna come down for a touch of poke, but it's not going to stop this. With the tidal wave now, there's a chance for Chonk Chortle to try and turn this around. Black Camel takes to the front line, and Sirius looks for that gold card. The full disengage from Chonk Chortle mean they get out scot-free with a nice bit of turret damage.
Right, bit of damage on the board, the presence on the map to keep this one forward. Meanwhile, Chonk Chortle finds a re-engage here. Big quickness in to find the double charm, but no kills. Meanwhile, in the mid lane, though, your presence is diminishing. Chonk Chortle with the 2. Luan here and Nori are able to pick up not only the turret, but the additional kill there onto Lizing.
They do end up losing the top lane turret for it, though Hitman does get a little bit of alone time. It's not nearly as scary as giving a Fiora alone time, since Renekton is not going to scale nearly as well, but still working out for him as Luan decides to take the engage, has that Trinity Force already completed, and you can feel Hitman as he is in a lot of trouble right now with that healing getting popped. Hitman is going to be taken down, we think, under the tower, but with the heals coming in, it might be enough to save him. Nice play from Hestia to find the knockup, but like we illustrated, not quite enough there, especially with that honey fruit just barely being enough.
Just barely being enough, but enough is definitely what you need here. It does bring up constant questions, though. Luan is now a problem as well, so you've got the Aurelia and the Fiora now. We talk about 1-3-1. This is where you're going to see it out in full force here. Granted, we did see response there come through from Hestia to try to play around with that Rakan. And either way, it's not good knowing that you're losing out and the only thing you can play around is a misguided attention. We talked about that mid lane being the power, the pressure of control, and that was what allowed for Hitman to finally swoop in and take that turret. Those are mistakes. Those are not the things you want to play around. That's reactive, not pro.
Exactly, and the engage is something that will really boost the proactivity of Naguara right now, or something that's very difficult for them to find without flanks. And fortunately enough for them, setting up for flanks and countering 1-3-1s both stem from the same thing, and it's the vision that they can set up. They don't have a whole lot of it right now. Their wards are basically non-existent, but they do have a second to play around. They got plenty of people piled up in the bot side where they might be able to find a pick onto Fat Cat.
Luan is just absurd. Yeah, the Dominus is forced out, but the Grand Duel might turn this one back around. A big stun, though, from afar might be the end. And finally, Hitman is able to take a duel in his favor.
Grievous wounds on this Renekton, really big, and now it's a 4v5 in the favor of Naguara. Rattle the Dragon, they try and take the fight, but already you've lost your Riven. Lizing ends up going down. It's the jungler, crucially, so Chonk Chortle are going to finish this objective out, get the smite down. If they take that away, they do lose their jungler, but it is what they came for here. Losing another pick is going to hurt, but not nearly as much as losing that dragon.
Right, the dragon going out the ways and is inevitable, seeing that Lee Zing falls here on this Riven, but the consultation prize is huge as well. Across the board, that's technically 4 kills in the remarkable last maybe 30 seconds here for Naguara, so finally finding some ground and footing to pull this team back up and shore up a lot of the gold that they've been missing out on. A big props to Sirius. I was very concerned regarding what we might see out of this Twisted Fate, but that alone, the kill right there on Aurelia, should be enough.
Yeah, that was really nice. However, there's still some questions about the side lanes where Luan is taking duel once again. We'll see if he can win this one against Hitman. It's still, grievous wounds are causing a big problem for this Fiora, and Luan doesn't feel confident taking the duel all the way home, as once again, objectives are the focus, and this one ends up going over to Lee Zing. But another fight might go in favor of Nori this time. He's got that package available. As it expires, he's going to lose his life as well. Lee Zing plays remarkably, but now Fat Cat is joining in from the side, and that knock-up landing should seal his fate. Riven unable to escape, and now Hitman with no ultimate walks in and will manage to just barely walk back out.
Gotta give mad props to Fat Cat there. Slides through the majority of that fight and goes in deep, able to secure not only Lee Zing, but Sirius as well, your major carry that has been putting Naguara in the best of positions here. So, that Aurelia, once again, even though you find the initial fight that looked good and the solo kill maybe on Sirius just a seconds ago, is not enough to stunt the growth that is continuing here.
Very even game right now, though, does leave it in anyone's court, especially as we continue to approach the next couple dragons. The third one going to be on the table relatively soon, and we still have yet to answer the question of whether we're going to get Chonk Chortle able to continue pressuring the side lanes. As right now, Hitman is proving a good enough answer, as is Sirius, something that we had doubted coming into this game just based off the draft alone. It means that Chonk Chortle's actual 3-man core can't find team fight wins, and with the side lane's not going in their favor either, they're not getting anything that's going in their advantage. And with the tower, like you illustrated, going down, it just becomes even more tangible of a problem.
Right. We're definitely seeing Naguara start to push their way into this one here as they are able to start responding towards that 1-3-1 that they drafted. The big things, though, that still are kind of up in the air is how the scaling potential of both Jack Locky and Nori will come into effect. They're starting to approach that 2-3 major item power spikes that will hold an actual ground here. And honestly, if I had picked one of the two, I'm going to place my bets on Nori on this Corki. I've seen the penetration. I've seen the damage. I got to watch the clear in those previous Immortals versus Cloud9 games, and it can be dominant.
Yeah, Corki goes absolutely wild, and he has a lot more mobility. However, one of the crucial things that I think need to be recognized by Chonk Chortle is that Grievous Wounds is not something they're going to get away without this game. You take a look at people like Hitman and Lee Zing, who are healing up immense amounts already. You back that up with the fact that Arvo on the Nami is going to be putting out even more healing, and I don't think that you can actually win this one without getting at least some healing cut to make sure that those team fights can be yours, because right now Lee Zing is completely immortal, and you can tell in the way that he's playing.
Ooh, yeah, I was about to say, going in very deep to potentially find a something there as this Swift Crash, but a quadruple grand entrance is going to turn this one on its heel. They're able to disengage, but Fat Cat's deep, a great response from the Broken Blade, is able to shred this team as Hitman keeps them all stretched out. It's still 1-for-1, both 80 carries down, but look at that health. You've already expended most of the poke available, and I don't think they should be able to respond, but maybe it's not a response. They're pulling the trigger themselves. A quick in from Sirius with the gold card as they go both deep. Punished out, Lee Sin to fall there. Arvo as well. Sirius unable to pick up the kills he wants as a grand entrance is going to secure Hitman as well here for Chonk Chortle.
That was a really, really scary, very protracted team fight, but as it started to take a step down, the trigger pull from Chonk Chortle, and especially from Hestia, was amazing. Not once, but twice, Zephyr. We saw big engages come through on this Rakan, and it is very clear why they prioritized this champion, because like a lot of others that are going to be joining us, not only in the semis, but now in the finals, Rakan is an extraordinarily potent pick, and one that may not have a whole lot of health, but very clearly has enough mobility that it doesn't matter.
Oh, I was about to say, it has held presence many a times ahead here, and the only thing I've seen muster something semblance of a response in terms of control or that much of gauge is that Thresh or even the Galio, surprisingly, that we got a little bit of a taste of in Game 1 today between Cloud9 and Immortals. Past that, though, it has so many opportunities not only to set these things up, but also sustain and put your team in a good place if you need the necessary peel here.
We're going to watch where this Rakan is positioning, as it's going to be the next team fight for Chonk Chortle. Naguara still looking for theirs, however, as, again, remember they rely on the vision, and look at how much of it they have, or rather, how much of it is dominated instead by Chonk Chortle. All of mid-vision, there's a 1 ward off to the left of mid lane right now that's giving Naguara a little bit of an edge, but instead, they have no idea they're being collapsed onto the bot lane, and that's the real problem.
Found themselves a little bit of crocodile. I hear it tastes like chicken. Either way, now 4v5. You see Chonk Chortle switch it on up, and they're going to turn their attention not only to top, but to this Baron. It's in fact, though, that they lose their focus. It's a quick engage by Naguara, but it doesn't come out on top.
And the really scary thing is that while you're trying to pull the trigger on these engages, while the Baron is being threatened, the side lane is still a really big problem. We've still got Luan in the bot lane and already engaged off the top lane. He's going to have to pull up here, but that tidal wave is a massive, and Hestia has to peel back instead of forward. Luan does end up finding a kill, though, as as Lee Zing goes down. Luan ends up backing off through the jungle, and fortunately enough for them, it isn't an even fight, but it's still a 1-for-2 that doesn't leave Naguara with a whole lot of options themselves.
Not much they can do there, but it's definitely something good. Backs against the wall. Things have not been working out for the Naguara squad here, and this might just be some more. The root finally comes through from Jack Locky into what is the bubble, but Luan with the quick flash is able to find the response. Hitman forced to expend a flash of his own, but the damage is done.
The riposts have been really well played around, I have to say, by Naguara. In the micro, they are doing incredibly against this Fiora, and their macro hasn't looked too bad either. They do lose the tier 2, but the fact that the base isn't cracked off of the immense pressure that we saw laying down earlier is already miraculous. Take a look at the items, however, and I want to check back in because there's exactly 1 Grievous Wounds picked up. And it is on Luan in the side lane. The only hope that you have is if this Fiora is going to be able to apply that and hopefully take down Hitman or Lee Zing.
Well, for now here, it's definitely the question that will work itself out, but I don't know. We've seen the presence here of these side lanes slowly play back into the favor of Naguara. For now, it looks like an engage might come through there, but it's just pressure. Pressure from Chonk making sure that they still have the dominant control and priority of this dragon. Oh, it's the Elder.
Yeah, Elder Ocean is going to give you a whole lot of sustain, and it's a lot more, I want to say, serious of an objective in a way. It sounds sort of weird to say, but it takes a lot more setup, a lot more conscious thought to be able to steal away an Elder Dragon, much akin to a Baron. That's why we see Naguara huddled up in the mid lane right now, knowing they can respond to either.
Here's the group.
Chortle, they're going to pull the trigger. Let's see what Naguara can do about it.
Well, maybe pull the trigger there on to the Elder, but it's definitely a fear on the mind with the Destiny coming out to reveal position here. Ooh, Hestia's in deep with the Grand Entrance to try to find a knockup, but the quick response here onto Lee Zing. Yes, there's going to be what is the Hextech belt, but it still doesn't quite catch. A response, though, continues forward as Luan goes deep here, but Corki, with the damage, continues to shred this back line. It's a double here for Luan, and rest of the team wiped out. Sirius the only one left alive, but not for long there.
Let's go. That's exactly the kind of play that you want to see, and it's from everybody involved as well. From Hestia to Luan. Shark Chortle, they are all on the same page now with the death timers, with the proximity of the fight to the base. They're going to be able to take the first game. Shark Chortle looked so good coming out of the first game. It was such an even fight until then, but Naguara, in the end, that could not stop that team fight, and a big part of that, I know that I want to hear what you have to say, of course, Zephyr, but a big part of that, in my mind, still goes to Black Camel. I'm always looking at this guy, and
Okay.
Hestia was playing out of his mind. I'm not taking that away from him. But Black Camel in that fight played insane. It was right alongside Hestia, pressuring out the backline, popping the Crescent Guard so that no damage was dealt to him, and then turning around and deleting Hitman with the rest of his team. It was the perfect sort of fake out, or the appel in fencing, and it was really amazing to watch.
You know what? I'll give you credit where credit is due, but I want to touch on Luan. Luan might have been put on a stunt regarding the side lane pressure when it comes to what we saw between Hitman and himself, but it was incredible in team fights none the same. Constantly finding presence into that back line to wipe anyone and everyone who standed in front of them, notably either Jackie, Locky, or Sirius at times, was just phenomenal here from Chonk Chortle. I can't just put Camel on the top pedestal, D, okay? I've got my own, all right?
Yeah, and I think that there's so many times in that game that you can look back and highlight different players that it is hard to pick a favorite, and I don't mean to play favorites. I know it sounds really odd.
We're playing a different game now.
Exactly. Well, like what I'm looking for is those highlight moments, and the fact is that we did get them from Luan. I think that they were ever so slightly delayed, but what you talk about with the Fiora in team fights is something that I think few teams are able to make use of, and speaks a lot to the coordination of Chunk Troll, because the Grand Challenge is, yes, a really great Fiora 1v1 tool, but it's also a really potent tool in the team fights, where that immense amount of healing that comes through when you kill somebody who's been marked by a Fiora can change a fight entirely. They don't have something like a Nami to work with. They have only the one source of Grievous Wound, so being able to even match the amount of HP regeneration that they're finding on the other side off the back of a single pick was really incredible.
Absolutely. And I don't want to just touch on the Fiora there. You also had incredible play here out of Fat Cat on that Irelia. And it slid through. And for good reason. There's a reason why it usually doesn't there. It held high presence, and it was able to mitigate what I really felt was the early game that Naguar kind of needed to find themselves in a decent spot here. But I think it starts in draft. That's the major point I really want to look at, because we talk about the concept of sliding through. This is where you shut it down. This is where you close the slide. You say, summer's over, folks.
And Chunk Turtle, I think, had themselves a really big advantage in the draft just last game. We'll see how it plays out this time around, as Ashvera is going to be taken away. Really nice tools in the bot lane, but those are taken away by Naguara, as we're still swapping around with the little title cards. We'll see how those end up playing out for them. Importantly, the Camille, however, removed this time by Chunk Turtle, is going to change things as well, because Fiora still definitely an option, and this time you can't respond to it with somebody who can put out similar pressure in a side lane.
If there was a one pick that you would particularly want to see change up from that last game, what would be? Because I can tell you right now it's Irelia, but would you agree on that, or would it be something else?
I think that Irelia is a really big part of the game plan for Chunk Chortle. I don't think that the problem was that Naguara didn't... What was that Irelia was OP, but it was that Naguara compositionally didn't have answers to a 1-3-1. Does that make sense?
I can see where you're coming from, but either way, my graces are granted. It still manages to pop its way out either way here. So no Irelia going to be on the field, and the first pick right immediately is that Corki. Constantly being an issue, and finally was something that actually showed up from Nori towards the very, very end, which is, with all respect, the time when it does.
Now, Naguara end up picking up the Renekton. Again, a very high priority pick for them. They take away the Rakan that I do really like. I think it's a really nice change up for them, and Rakan was something that caused them a lot of problems. But the priority on Renekton is odd to me, because yes, it looked good, but it wasn't something that Naguara really benefited from. They have plenty of bruises. What they need is engaged. If it's not going to come from the top lane, it's got to come from the jungle.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see that engage potential out there, especially since they still leave Fiora up on the board. And if you want to route that one back again on Chonk Turtle, I don't think that's a bad idea. Either way, it is the pick to behold here. And I think it has some context. Naguara, they did discuss with me previously that if it is necessary and they want to play hard carry around Hitman, that is something that they will do. Sirius looked great in that game on Twisted Fate. It came out of nowhere. It was surprising, a shock to me and you, knowing that the draft was already stacked up against him. It was the Fiora that kind of stunted the growth of Hitman, but there were times in the 1v1 that he really didn't look particularly bad.
And I will kind of eat my words there. They do have the Rakan for the extra bit of oomph, or actually the only bit of oomph when it comes to pulling the trigger on an engage. Backing that up with an Orianna, it's really nice, and Naguara have a lot of backline access that Chonk Turtle have responded to adequately with things like the Tidal Wave, the Xayah, and the Corki. We've seen this story told before. They once again opt into the Fiora matchup that Hitman did win for a while, so Chonk Turtle still incur a risk right now. But again, compositionally, I feel like Chonk Turtle do have a really good answer, but Naguara's composition is now, as opposed to last game, slightly easier to execute. That is a shore up from last game alone.
Right, they give them more presence to find their way into a fight with an actual direction. You talk about what kind of stood out. That Rhythm pick not really having the damage necessary to be that heavy-handed. And this is something that I have seen and I do know about. Naguara, they like aggression. They like Lee Sin on those assassins. But this is weird. We talk about peel, we talk about sustain. Chunk Turtle has plenty of that abundant to prevent that Rengar from really being a threat as we approach that mid to late state of the game.
I do like the Rengar, especially because, you know, you talk about the peel. You can still one-shot Corki in the late game. I'm expecting it to force a stopwatch enchantment on the boots, as that being its main priority here. It can also be a pretty potent split pusher, but in the jungle, I'm not really seeing that as an option. And I think that there are a lot of questions, not just around the Rengar, but around the J4 as well. Chonk Turtle choosing to go for that. I think a lot of the power of J4 comes from him being able to lock you in place. But there's so much mobility on the side of Naguara that Chonk Turtle must be seeing something else in this that I'm just not. Why not Xin Zhao?
I would not particularly understand given the presence that the Xin Zhao held, but the lock in place is maybe potentially something to work with. You talk about putting both that Corki and Xayah in a good spot to maybe give access to their damage here, but it doesn't really play well into what you have drafted with the Fiora on your belt. Now, maybe this is kind of alluding to the fact that they're looking to take this more aggressively towards that 4-on-1 stance coming into game for those team fights here, as I'll be honest, I don't really expect Chonk to directly take a team fight at any given point, given the composition that they have drafted. But with something like the Jarvan having that tool, it still provides, albeit maybe a little less than what you would expect out of, say, something like that Zen we usually have on the board.
Yeah, and perhaps the value of the Jarvan comes not from things like the level 5, not from things like the team fights in the mid game, but a lot from the early presence. And of course, later game, you still have Cataclysms that can do a decent amount of damage, but he can give people like Orianna a pretty darn hard time.
That's fair.
Even duel with the Renekton with some relatively high burst, lock him down for some of your side laners to come in. People like the Fiora, who are relatively high damage, can pair really well with the Jarvan, and it can create a lot of 2v2 scenarios where you're very comfortable because you have crowd control available to you that until level 5, Naguara don't in the majority of their lanes. There's a little bit of a stun from Renekton, but the Shockwave is the only thing available from the Orianna. Same thing in the bot lane where Naguara are pretty skill shot in air quotes, I guess, dependent. So I think that Chonk Turtle definitely have some sort of value coming from the jungle, definitely, but it has to come down to early game plays that we didn't see them excel in last game. I think they did well, but the early game wasn't where it was won.
Right. I was about to say, I was waiting for you to point it out. It's that small window of opportunity that you really have to play around the pick, whereas something like Zen kind of extends out the whole game. That's something that could potentially work out here, but like you said, it isn't particularly consistent with the win condition. But if we look back towards that game one, a lot of the choices that they made, especially with drafting that Irelia coming through with the Fiora, was a testament towards taking lane dominance. This lane kingdom outcome saying that I can play this up and against you better than you yourself. Right, and that's what I think this also stems from if we look at this matchup between Naguara here. If they feel like they have the presence to work out early and take those lane-to-lane matchups with success, then yeah, Camel only benefits that. But for now, just a little toe touch.
Once again, opting into, from blue side, the push in the mid lane, although this time both teams are actually going to pile in, trying to get themselves that extra little bit of oomph. However, junglers left out of it as Black Camel and Lee Zing both want that zoom start in the jungle. Luan not going to spot Lee Zing, who's opted into the Raptors as well, which I really like, especially as sort of in results-based. In retrospect, the fact that he's got a little bit more stealth on the Sneaky Knife Cat is going to be really nice. As he moves his way up towards the top side, it could turn into a potential early gank onto somebody like this Fiora, as Hitman very intentionally not pulling the wave as of right now, finally breaks that one.
I am interested. This kind of flips the perspective when we talk about what we saw of Naguara last game in terms of taking control and understanding what could come out of Camel. Obviously, you switch it because Lee Zing holds presence on something like the Assassin. You want to know where he is, especially since early game can provide for him if he is able to get that one lock or the knock regarding the fact that you have a lot of CC to work with here on Naguara. But in response, Naguara lets Camel slide for once. This is very lucky. That ward comes out in just the nick of the split of time, but maybe it won't even be able to defend against the dive. A flash on a turn and a quick exhaust is going to be able to turn it around, but Nori, with a quick thinking on the flash and a turn shot that just barely doesn't kill him, is enough to save the day.
And the minions tell a story here, because we were looking up in the top side, expecting the gank to come in from Lee Xing to try and shut down Luan. That doesn't happen, and it's not just us that know that. Chonk Chortle know it as well. Given that you've got no pressure in the top side now as Naguara, they take the bot lane for themselves and can start really abusing that with the fact that you've got that extra little bit of kill, extra little bit of gold, and extra little bit of presence, especially on Black Camel, who, like we said, did want to start something early and has definitely done so.
Right, and he looks to potentially do that once again. You see the presence of this bot lane, the waves that will soon to be crashing here, and he's just hovering, sitting around that jungle. Now, will be potentially spotted out by Lee Xing here, so if there is a time for something to work out, this would be it. It's a great grand entrance to find the knockup, but not quite everything they want. At least they do pull out that flash, which has provided to be a great engage tool for something like the Jarvan, especially this early.
Yeah, the early flash from Black Camel is the thing that saves him, and it's really nice to see the lack of... The restraint is the word that I'm going to go with. I was going to say the lack of overconfidence like a child, but I decided not to. The fact is that Black Camel is playing with his brain on, and that's what I'm trying to say, knowing that even when he is having a really nice early game, it's not going to turn into all that. However, for Hitman, it's also not going to turn into too much, as he has to pop the Dominus just to survive up here on the top lane, although... The items, I think, are stacking up in Hitman's favor, despite the fact that the matchup doesn't for the moment. He's got that Bramble Vest and is already cutting down on the healing from Luan. Once he picks up a few more, he's going to take that 1v1 again.
Right, I think we'll see the reiteration here from Hitman there. I would like to see the Dominus maybe a little bit earlier if he wanted to make the full turnaround there, but that grand duel is something that you always have to be catering towards. For now here, nothing too imperative. We do see that reset finally come out from Black Camel to, find presence in something other than the enemy jungle, looking for more than a quick gank here. So that will enable him and put what is that Cataclysm into effect for the next time he routes into one of these major lanes, which I'm very interested to see how it works, because I understand its presence with, say, something like the Fiora, but I'd love to see the combo with Fat Cat or Nori and see what that may provide.
Right, we've got an ultimate here from Lee Xing. See if this one turns into kills. First ult, really important for the Rengar. They've got Sirius with the ball as well. Great ball delivery system on this Rengar. Lee Xing's looking for it right now, but needs to jump in time to steal this Herald. Goes for it, but the tidal wave stops him, and the package now to cut this fight in half is turning it into the favor of Chonk Chortle.
They are able to find the one pick onto Black Camel, as Hitman is definitely into the back with the Dominus, but it's already done. You've already secured that major objective, and you've lost out what was supposed to be your major engage, but there's that Dominus once again. Deep it is in. Luan's got the damage, but not enough to potentially kill. Goes back in on a series, but a great dash there from Arvo is able to secure the response they want. Now to keep this fight going, they've got to be careful of those feathers if they pull back from Nori, but it could be just enough. Black Camel's into the fight once again, but no Flagon Dragon.
Very scary stuff there, is on a knife's edge. That fight was played. Luan, unfortunately, going down, gives a small edge over to Naguara, and you can see it inside of the gold right now. Just a small touch ahead are Naguara. Not at all something that's going to determine the game, but if it continues to stack up, Chonk Chortle are going to start taking off, as already that team fight was really well played from them. We talked about it, the tidal wave, the package, perfectly lined up.
Yeah, absolutely great. And they knew what they were playing into, which is something that you have to recognize if we start looking at these teams as a whole here, which, sounds obvious, but can definitely be punished if you're not smart with it. So for now, teams return back here. The big thing I want to look at now is this Rift Herald. You already have a little bit of presence in favor of Naguara. That could swing this huge. Yeah, look at the
Fat Cat is trying his best to keep that from happening. They do have the Rift Herald coming down from the top lane in the hands of Luan that can crack this mid lane tower, give them a little bit more presence, and it's going to be summoned right now as Arvo goes for the team fight. Nobody else is there just yet. He ends up going down, and a big tidal wave continues this one again in the favor of Chonk Chortle. A little bit of lack of coordination there from Naguara costing that fight.
Right, split across the board there. Arvo far too deep, and as a result, quickly punished. And this time around, even with something like that, there's not much room to punish at any given point. Instead, it's Chonk Chortle deep, a flag and drag, 2 to be found. Serious, maybe the next one, as the turret's not even going to source your kills out for you.
Even Luan escaping there with sub 100 HP, getting healed up by Hestia on the exit. Now can turn onto the Dragon, and the roll just continues for Chonk Chortle. But have they overstayed? Will Hitman be able to find this kill? Black Camel's looking like a jug right now. The knockup comes in. Black Camel recommits, but he doesn't end up taking that Dragon. Instead, Fat Cat's the one that does it, making sure the team is nice and healthy. Still, Chonk Chortle managed to win the fight and get the root on the way out. Even with the low health bars, they are playing immaculately.
Yeah, absolute perfection out of these guys there. They're able to pick up Arvo there, even in his double knockup engage, and it was a great juggle. Rooted back in, and look at this! It's a quick feather, it's a quick root, it's Nori coming right off the bat to keep the stream running.
Overstepping on the Renekton is something that really will cost you in these team fights where there's so much lock up and so much damage to follow it. That was just really well played from Nori. I can't take it away from him. Whatever happens in that mid lane, being able to defend it after they got not only the kills, but the Dragon and the mid lane tower. The fact that they hang on, really incredible stuff. Side lane, however, not going well for Naguara either. Fat Cat goes for that kill, and now finally Nori is at least going to be forced to burn that Feather Storm. Doesn't get away. It gets taken down by Lee Zing. That's why you pick this Rengar. Will he get out alive, however? Very, very low. We got to follow this up.
Bubble.
Nice Aqua Prison gonna take him down.
Easily able to find a response, even in the face of losing Nori out there. So it goes without saying that Chonk Chortles are always willing to punish this one. And the bigger consequence is the fact that you drop the jungle for something as little as that simple kill onto Nori, and you're going to remove the Rift from the map too.
Now 10-3 in the kill score. This game has definitely exploded since that mid lane fight. A 6,000 gold lead in the favor of Chonk Chortle is much, much bigger than the one they had earlier. And they got another Rift Herald to drop this one, take it down. Arvo again goes in, but now the follow-up is there. This time with the exhaust going on to Hitman, though. The results are mitigated, and instead it is Luan that trades back on the other side with another post off cooldown, and Fat Cat roaming up to the top side. The Rift Herald will end up dying. Chonk Chortle will not crack the tower, but they get the kill and they get out alive.
I was about to say, you remember that pedestal I brought up prior to this match regarding Luan and my absolute love for this Fiora? It is showing out in full force there. You see the team fight, and it is split like a perfect pie. Luan sweeps in and finds the backline presence when necessary there, because I really do feel like Naguara found the correct knock. That would have been an absolute wipe here on Chonk Chortle, except for the fact that Luan's running you down.
And with this Fiora, already plenty of gold on him, almost 2 items in. Going to be able to look for you in the kills in the side lane whenever he wants. The 4-1 that we talked about being a possibility for Chonk Chortle is something that they can abuse now with the source of engage they got with Black Camel, with the mid lane sustain that they've already got with Nori and Fat Cat. Nori just backing and picking up his second item of the game. But Naguara not taking this one lion down there, instead rotating down to the bot side to try and find themselves a turret as well. It's a meager trade against a Fiora, but it's one that is keeping Naguara in the game. 7,000 gold, almost the lead right now, and every bit matters. Black Campbell goes fishing for an engage, not going to find anything for right now as Jack Locky needs to get out of safety, and Black Campbell's on the hunt. He's waiting for that cooldown. Fat Cat gets caught out on the side though.
Luan, still though, he's able to kite that one out. Either way, finds the one that he needs, and while yes, Hitman's got the Dominus playing to his effect, Luan continues the hunt. A flag and drag over the wall, make sure that this one is secured out here, but Chonk Chortle are so quick to punish out what is the little advantage that Naguara was trying to find.
Hitman plays that really well, I will say, finding at least the 1 kill in response on a big misstep from Fat Cat that should have punished him a lot sooner. He manages to get that kill back, and now with the dragon going down, perhaps they can find a little more. Sirius has found shockwaves before, but this time the engage is a little bit later. Sirius actually has to flash away and is still exhausted, hasn't an impact yet, and he's not going to get to as he gets knocked up and taken down, with Lee Zing trying to finish off Luan. The riposte will keep this fencer alive, and Lee Zing will go down as well. Sirius down, jungler out, Baron not on the table, but if it were, holy, it would be chunks.
I was about to say, it feels bad to say it, but this team, while they do hold direction at times and they play together, they just don't have the level of damage, gauge, control to fight this one out. Luan alone is able to pressure off a majority of this fight here before it even begins. It's a candy on top of the cake that you get the strong engage off with Black Camel, but it didn't even feel like it was necessary.
You know, at the point that fight ends up, I guess, truly starting, Sirius has already been forced to flash over the wall, and the follow-up is the really deadly thing, but he doesn't have anywhere to put the ball that's really good, and with such a core part of your team, this Orianna, that can lay down immense amounts of damage when she's set up properly, already on the back foot, already running for her life, you don't have a whole lot of options to lay down damage back, as Naguara is. With somebody like the Kaisa, who's really good at taking down single targets, you don't have that consistent damage laying down across, especially a really big front line like the Jarvan, backed up by somebody who can literally go invulnerable with the riposte.
Literally go invulnerable seems to be the big problem right now for the majority here of Naguara, and it's going to continue to be one. And now, as they are able to start splitting this one out, there's not much that they can do. They're able to find a source of a kill here onto Luan, but look at how much of Naguara it takes to do such a thing. They give up a free Baron in turn for just the one.
I mean, crucially, it isn't free. It does cost Chonk Chortle at least their side laner, and the one that would have made the best use of the Baron. But the fact is, the thing that impressed me the most about it is the speed at which that Baron goes, because Nori wasn't even there. It's just Fat Cat's DPS, and that's on 2 items. As he resets and picks up a third, you've got to be fearing for your life, because if Baron is going down that quickly, think about how quickly Sirius, think about how quickly Jack Locky, Arvo, Lee Zing, even Hitman are dying. These are not tanky champions. These are bruisers at best, and they are all going to die to 2, 3 autos from Nori and Fat Cat.
All right, Dia, Halloween was a few days ago. You can stop putting the fear into this squad here. And just 2 alone is enough to strike out the 4. Black Camel goes low, but still finds the turret, and they run away from something like that. They run away. That's the fear, Dia.
I mean, Black Camel, he just has all the time in the world to play his game. Nori getting sustained up in the front line, while Fat Cat does it in the back line. Still, kills continue to funnel in to Chonk Chortle. At this point, it is far and away their game to lose. They are not going to be doing that as they take down 3 members of Naguara, move themselves into the base, onto the Nexus. They're going to move themselves all the way into the finals on the back of yet another semi 2-0.
An absolutely dominant and even daunting one to behold here, and it definitely brings to mind, where does this team stand in comparison to Immortals, who just looked as good in their own matchup tonight against C9? But for now, we'll break down this one.
Yeah, this game was really fun to watch because I liked the strategies that Naguara were trying to pull out, especially with the Rengar and with Arvon's Rakan, who looked really good. I think Sirius had some really nice shockwaves, but the big difference between these 2 squads wasn't in terms of the map play, it wasn't in terms of the individual play, it was just in terms of the coordination. And that's something that Chonk Chortle definitely had in spades, and Naguara, maybe looking a little bit disjointed at times, would need to work on to be able to fight at the level that the players individually can.
Right, and we talked about some major questions being brought up regarding that Jarvan pick and where it held presence. That goes into kind of that coordination that you just discussed. The fact that early they were able to play around something like that, even though they had potentially better picks to work with, just to give them the extra oomph to put this team into an incredibly strong lead, was something that was maybe a risk, but just as good.
Now, we've got the finals coming up in just a few minutes. We've got a lot to work through with Immortals and Shock Chortle. I'm expecting this one to go the distance all 3 games, but before we go to that, we're going to take a very short break, set up our next game, and then we will pop in a few minutes.
My moments doesn't mean I don't need you. I fell in love with your colors. They kind of tell me what I'm thinking. Fell in love with the way we are and the way we lose it. There's something different about us, and the reason why we stay. We fly around like paper planes. They never know where we will fall. Nobody can see us, still they wanna tear us apart. There's something different about the way we are. There's something different about us. 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 We're pouring cup after cup after cup. Yeah, it's just the way we do it. Anything just to block out the real life, real life. Yeah, we're loving the way they think we're so messed up. Even if what we're doing is bad, there's so many emotions. Sharing stories that we never had, yeah, none is real. I think we're searching for reasons not to be like them. We fly around like paper planes. They never know where we will fall. Nobody can see us, still they wanna tear us apart. There's something different about
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the big matchup, Zephyr. This is the finals, Immortals versus Chonk Chortle. We saw it both semifinals to bring us here, and with those two previews to the teams, I want to know what you think going into this matchup. Your initial thoughts. Where are we looking? Who do you love?
Who do I love? Well, I love you, but past that alone, I'm definitely putting a lot more love towards Immortals this time around, especially in that bot lane. Gume here and Charm, especially with the heavy engage, definitely spelled for wonders here in their matchup against Cloud9. So I'm expecting big plays from them that will set up, hopefully, what will be 3 games of expert play.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the support matchup that you alluded to, because on one side, we know that the Rakan is really big. There are plenty of other picks as well, but the Nami on the side of Chonk Chortle, I do think really impressed me, and I want to see how that plays into the Rakan, since engage and counter engage do tend to have an interesting interplay between them. The big question for me is, of course, going to be the top lane, where you were talking up Luan. We can't forget that Zoro is going to be on the other side for Immortals, and Zoro is a very, very scary laner. You try and play Fiora into him, and I'm not sure how it's going to go, because Chonk Chortle, I think fair enough to say, had a very different semifinals than the finals will be against Immortals. Immortals are on top of their game right now.
Right, they can capitalize off of any weakness you pull out here, and Zoro, especially as we look towards Luan being maybe even primary carry potential for Chonk Chortle, has a remarkable way of playing around these team fights that we didn't have much of a sight to see out of Naguara through Hitman. So I don't think it's going to be as easy as to route, but I still think we're going to see heavy presence, whether it be in the split push or finding his way into those major team fights. Now, though, as we approach this draft, before we get into it, I do want to announce that we are, of course, having that 3rd place match, but it is taking its way out here off stream.
Yeah, so if you want to see the results from that, you can, of course, check our Twitter. You can check the Liquipedia. The information will be everywhere. But the final result will be the one that we are following the whole way in. And Immortals smartly taking away that Olaf. Of course, a very powerful pick right now, but especially when we're considering strong junglers and Chonk Chortles together, you don't want to give it over to them. That's a terrifying aspect, because Chonk Chortle have definitely been playing through their jungle. He's a big enabler of this squad. Whether or not he gets ahead in the early game, this guy can and will engage on your face, and Immortals have to be pretty careful of that, especially because Yikes hasn't exactly been playing the same way. Yikes likes to play, even when we saw him on the Lee Sin, a lot more passive of a jungle style in the early game.
Right. For now, though, we do look at some of these other bans here, and we talk about that support matchup, and the 2 major picks that you particularly brought up are already off and away from the board. You don't have that Rakan to work with, and you don't have that Nami. We've seen some other come out here today. Alone, the Galio looked impressive, but there's also great picks like the Thresh that was very predominant here from Cloud9 much early on, or the Braum, which held great presence. But yes, the Ashe is in, baby.
Oh my god, I was looking at the bans and I totally forgotten about it. Gume's Ashe is crazy, man. These late game arrows are nuts, and Immortals are setting themselves up for that same sort of weak side, bot side that ends up turning into an extreme amount of utility late game. And Chonk Chortle playing with that favor towards the top side, again, shown in the Renekton pick, could run into trouble late if that bot lane is allowed to sort of sit back, relax, and have a lot of resources from Immortals be dedicated to keeping top lane even.
Right, because if you put, whether it could be the flex on that Corki or particularly something else that may come through to solidify that bot lane for Chonk Chortle, you talk about a lot of that gold stemming that way. And I don't particularly see the Renekton being the pillar that will dominate these team fights come late game, but that fact alone that you bring up is enough that even if it may not find success against Zoro, which I'm already predicting this will be a harder matchup for Chonk Chortle, it still has those lingering effects. Now, the Galio does make its way, and so granting me a little bit of the prediction of success, even though I pride myself as a play-by-play caster, we've seen this one. We got the opportunity on its impact as an engaged tool. You don't particularly usually expect it, but when you don't really have anything to work with, you no longer got the Rakan on the board or anything else, it definitely still holds great nice.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. I was looking at the Graves and going, of course, Immortals are pulling out the Graves. Yikes is really good on it. But then I looked over and I saw a Vi and I was like, I'm not watching Arcane, so why am I seeing a Vi right now? Junk Chortle are pulling out a jungler that I have not seen a whole lot of in recent history. However, the strengths of Vi are definitely ones that haven't disappeared. It's just that she hasn't been prioritized by a lot of junglers because she runs this middle ground of not quite being the best bruiser in the game, not having a whole lot of AoE damage, but she does bring that secure lockdown, especially at level 5, and has a little bit of really nice gank potential if you're able to land the knock up, even at the level 1 or 2 marker. The Janna alongside this gives Chonk Chortle a really nice way to both find an isolated pick, while at the same time preventing dive onto their backside. But Immortals now reveal that they don't need to dive. They got that Orianna, which is definitely dangerous.
Right, far more than just definitely dangerous here. You talk about the pick composition that Chonk Chortle have enabled for themselves, and the peel that now comes out in response. You already had something great starting to begin with that Galio, but the Orianna is already going to put such a heavy pressure around this zone that doesn't allow Chonk Chortle to fully enact upon their wishes. And I really do feel like this team is all about testing the whims of each of these lanes. That's why they've drafted such a pick presence comp, and that's why you see that Vi come out there, even though it doesn't typically usually appear, right? It allows for the presence to get someone individually in a great place of success. To finally wrap this one up, though, we do see the Gragas kind of give us that full wombo necessary for Immortal, and Irelia that definitely looks scary.
Now, Aurelia is really good for Chonk Chortle because she gives you this continued follow-up, really nice benefactor off of the lockdown that Vi can provide. That is your one source of engage here. Chonk Chortle only have Black Camel to rely on when it comes to being able to actually start fights. And what worries me is that unless this Aurelia is getting a flank, Immortals have a lot of counterplay to that. The Orianna that was picked up right after the Vi lock-in says a lot, because if you're engaging on any one of us, we're going to put the ball between you and your team, make it a minefield. The Gragas does exactly the same thing, being able to keep this Vi separated, and Immortals can turn things around into a 4v5 unless this Aurelia is on a flank. It's going to come down to, specifically, actually, I suppose you could say the Aurelia or the Corki who can have the package, but one of those two needs to be splitting the fight on Immortals, or it's going to be a very, very clean front to back.
Right, and that kind of stems away from the idea of a single tool engage that is actually like in your favor. You're looking to prey off of weakness here, the split, the disassociation, the kind of lack of cohesion that I don't typically see out of Immortals. They're very good at sticking to their game plans, and especially when they're routing with teams that are more consistent. Something like this that is very wombo oriented, that has plenty of peel to disengage from this, but also all of the tools necessary if you step out of line, which is exactly what we might see happen here from Chonk Chortle.
I will say that Chonk Chortle, when it comes to controlling vision, did super well in the semifinals. I thought that their control around the 1-3-1s and even the 1-4 that they had in game 2 was really nice and provided them a lot of safety. I hope that it can benefit them in an aggressive way this time around, but even if it doesn't, that 1-4 is still a possibility. Galio can throw a wrench in your plans, but this Aurelia gets far ahead enough, and Chonk Chortle don't have anything to worry about. They've got the Renekton as well to be able to pull you in multiple directions, and they can run back their plan from game 1 against Naguara, against Immortals, and see how that one works out. Immortals do still have that Ashe, though, and that's the thing that's worrying me, is that not only can the Galio address some of the side lanes, but you've got that counterplay of saying, okay, your team is split up, we're gonna 5v3 you now, and on a 30-second cooldown, I think we see late game, you can get some really, really nice choice picks to start that fight.
And I think that's more the way I see this one going. We talk about the level of aggression that Chonk was allowed to have in this recent semifinals, and I want to shape it up to giving Chonk a great pat on the back. They had a fantastic level of control around some of these major objectives or setting up for those early ganks. But I will say, I do think some of that stems from the lack of presence that Naguara really held across the map from a more than shoddy draft in game 1 and then not really having a tail's end of anything coming out of game 2 there. I think we'll see a little bit more of Chonk Chortle on their toes here, and these big boys might be struggling for a fall.
Yeah, they're going to be very heavily reliant on their success around still Black Camel during the early and mid game.
Yep.
If it comes to late game, even Black Camel, I'm not sure can save you. And so Chunk Turtle, in a way, get to play exactly the same game they've been playing the whole time, but without the promise of that late game success. I think the one thing they can look to, of course, the Aurelia that you and I both know is extraordinarily powerful, but also the Corki brings an unrivaled amount of consistent damage on the side of Immortals. Yes, they've got the Ashe and they've got the Graves, but it really does come down to Graves and Orianna to be the carries for Immortals, both of whom can be picked. And if you're picking off Orianna, especially as Black Camel, if you can get the lockdown on her, there isn't going to be a shockwave to stop the rest of your team from piling in, finishing that one off. And at that point, only one consistent DPS source up against 2, potentially even 2.5, we can call Renekton in the late game. That can get really hairy.
And then one last thing to kind of wrap this one up, because we haven't really touched on it yet, is that Graves having its presence as well. It's definitely more damage oriented and something that doesn't really have the tools to stem in its own engage in some of these lanes particularly. But if given the opportunity to root into something like the Orianna playing off of, say, that Shockwave or the Enchanted Crystal Arrow that we have been hyping up out of Guame in the combination of that Galio, I think that's where that strength will rely. Now, how far that goes is a big question, because if that Graves doesn't find that level of expertise early on, I think it has much less of an impact in comparison to the Vi, which technically is more direct in what they want to do.
Now, I've become a pretty big fan of the Graves, and I want you to get to see it as well, because I would agree with you that generally Graves is going to struggle here. Yikes has a very his game sense is extraordinarily high, especially inside of the micro fights. I think he does a really good job of maximizing Graves' otherwise high single target burst kit into one that can be laying across multiple members. He's got really good snipes on a lot of the abilities, and I'm looking forward to how he'll warp the game in a way that perhaps Chunk Turtles are not used to. You don't see that many Graves, especially at this level, and in the same way, we don't see that many Vi's. So one of these guys is going to be thrown off their game, but for the early stages, with both starting on their red, both spotted on vision as well, we're going to get a pretty slow start.
Slow start, definitely indeed, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see their impact towards the mid here. Yikesy already making himself known. You see the charge come through and a great knock-up straight on the front here. He's able to get a little bit of the burst back, but that forced flash is big here, especially knowing that Yikesy naturally doesn't have too much to play around in terms of direct engage with that Graves.
Now, knowing that the junglers are going to visit mid lane, that's another place where Graves can come out ahead, but with the big misstep there, I do think Black Camel is the one that definitely is going to benefit, in the sense that now he knows that should he find Yikes again in the jungle, he's not going to be able to escape. With both junglers going in opposite directions, the Scuttle Crabs now being the focuses, Yikes has the chance to take away some top camps as well, and Black Camel should know that this is going down, that the Krugs are no longer going to be his. Luon pings it out, but it is going to be more farm into somebody who's already very damage heavy.
And definitely damage heavy, and I'm still waiting for the profit that you brought up here, the Dia predictions, to come alive, because I still want to bet against this as much as you've painted a beautiful picture here for this Graves. I really don't think it may have as much of an impact as it may be foretold here, unless something comes about here in the next 3 to 4 minutes. For now, though, we do see that return from Black Camel towards this bot side, and it's a quick dash away. No flashes. Oh no, a flash is, my apologies, expended here out of charm.
And it's all for the safety of the bot lane, whose goal isn't to dominate the lane against this Corki Janna. You kind of let them farm up, which doesn't feel the best against Corki, but is all about an investment for later. However, we take a look at the mid lane, and that investment is definitely one that's taken a little bit more aggressive pathing. Batcat picks up a kill. Hoon does answer it back as it was under the tower, so more or less going to be relatively even. Who's going to be able to come back to collect a nice wave, but things haven't really taken off on either side yet. Scores 1-1, and despite the fact that Chunk Turtle got that advantage in the first blood, you'll notice that very slowly, Immortals are the ones accruing a gold lead.
Right, and that's just due to the natural state of some of these individual lanes. Surprisingly, something that I really didn't take into account here, Zoro has a much greater hold here against Luan than I really expected, and has a lot to do with the pressure of that burst and the distance that he can also work with in terms of throwing them caskets out here. A natural surprise in its own right, but something that I really am happy to see.
And he's been able to pick up some items as well. The Renekton that we've seen picking up the anti-heal into Fiora now gets turned on its head, and is the Gragas picking up the anti-heal into Renekton. Definitely Iraqi Zoro going to be the tankier one of this particular matchup, while Luan starts working his way towards that Black Cleaver, and Yikes is trying to cover the mid lane up against Black Camel. He's got a lot of burst at close range, and Black Camel is gonna go down just like that. As soon as you don't land one knock up his buy, you're out.
No respect there to behold, and Yikesy is quick to capitalize. In turn, it's also that shockwave that makes sure you launch that one out, but it's the follow-up from that collateral damage that makes sure that this one goes on forward. Iraqi Zoro quick on the hunt there with a great casket, and Charm to follow through with the heroic entrance. Deep Ears, Yikesy's cleaning up your back end with the Janna. He's going to get punished out, but you split the team, and as a result, both Black Camel and Fat Cat are going to fall. Iraqi Zoro punished out here, but it's going to be in turn Luan trying to find, yes, at least the one in response to the pressure that has come out.
Oh, Hoon's not going to flash. Hoon doesn't have to flash. That's unfortunate. I thought he was going to try and go for it. Luan plays like a god in that fight. Nori still can find some kills. Ends up picking up one. Iraqi Zoro is very, very low. And Nori ends up picking up the Rift Herald at the same time. A little bit of overconfidence there costs you big. And Immortals give over some very unnecessary kills trying to pick up the Rift Herald. They lose that. With it being summoned now in the mid lane, they're going to lose even more gold. The lockdown is even more punishing, but Gume's trying to answer back with the Enchanted Crystalline Arrow, not finding a long enough stun underneath the tower. Immortals now finally find themselves at a pretty substantial gold disadvantage.
I'm curious what they're going to do here about this dragon. They know they got the efficient reset off, playing around that rift in particular, but they could still potentially lose out on this one. You notice how Black Camel's sticking around, making sure to split this one out. Get a little bit of the tornado on the knockup, and the rest is just waiting to step in and pull the trigger. But Charm there, I like this. Going to be the front in the face that prevents you from really walking in here. In turn, though, I like this out of Chonk. They recognize that this is something that they can't play into, and they're not willing to take that trade because they saw what happens if you do something like that. You end up like Immortals roughly about a minute ago.
I am really worried, though, because Shank, despite seeing that dragon go down, don't pull the trigger on a Yikes that is very much overstaying. Charm was ultimately there to back him up, but it took a long time to get to that point, and Yikes was just standing there autoing in front of them. It's a bit of a lack of confidence coming through from Chonk Chortle, and I'm not sure whether it's indicative of a larger lack of confidence, or whether it was just a momentary hey guys, let's wait up, let's not lose control of this game. Immortals have something planned. There's some respect going down there, and I do want to see whether it becomes a pattern, and whether Immortals start to get away with a few too many things that they really shouldn't be.
Well, you know, that's definitely true. I do think the fight that plays off of that Rift Herald has a much bigger impact on that. We talk about windows of opportunity, the picks that can come out, say something from like this, where you have Assault and Battery up, able to make a fight work, but a quick response. Yikes, Hoon, the combo, the Shockwave, an Enchanted Crystal Arrow to stun out Hestia, securing not just one, but the two there.
And even when Gume is not there, Gume is there, throwing out the Enchanted Crystal Arrow, gets that pick back. Yikes, still confident as ever, walking up here, almost picks off Black Camel with the collateral damage and continues laying down the hurt onto this tower, has the backup of Hoon, and this guy is playing like a monster on the Graves, as Immortals keep this kill score very close to even, but still have yet to reclaim the lead from earlier.
It's tough to see here. Looking out now towards the rest of this one, trying to find a real opportunity to play around what potentially Chonk could do. I haven't really seen a good response in terms of that pick because it plays back onto what I said during draft. When you're looking for those individual takes, you have to be preying on the misplacement and separation of these teams. You look at how close and how quick Immortals was able to respond in something that Chalk Chortle really thought they had the advantage into. Not just say Gume alone with that really sweet arrow, but the fact that you had quick rotation from Whom and Charm and the rest. Stuff like that prevents this composition from making its impact, as well as the fact that as it continues to go later and later, it gets weaker.
It's really crazy, actually, to see Immortals being the ones to split the map in that way. And like you said, the sort of scaling, racking up in their favor right now is going to be really important for later on when they're able to continue to do that same thing with a lot more damage behind them. Raki Zoro, now the front man in what is going to be another Rift Herald contest. Chonk Chortles have already started this one up. It is very slow, but Immortals are considering opting into the mid lane tower instead. Yikes, however, having no part of that is definitely not somebody who will avoid fights. Very willing to take them, and we need to see that decisive pick from Black Camel onto a squishy target for this team fight to go in Chonk Chortle's favor. There it is.
Saw him battery deep and in, but it can't quite find the collapse onto that pick there. They get a little bit of a heal back from the redemption, but already Nori is far too low. Luen to step forward. The Dominus is down, though. They at least secure the kill as Fat Cat steps forward. In and out through the Vanguard's edge. A response from Gume with the presence of this poke is enough to keep Chonk Chortle on their heels here.
That was extraordinarily played. We called it out, and as we did, it happened. Black Camel and Nori on the same page about jumping onto Hoon. They blow all of the utility of this Orianna with the ultimate and the flash expended. Yikes now having to back away again from this Rift Herald called back towards his team as Immortals really want to secure this one. Down in the kills right now as they throw out an Enchanted Crystal Arrow, and unfortunately, you just don't get to play the game anymore.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do there, and that is not a place you want to be in the face of these two major objectives being down, because honestly, Luan probably one of the better carries to be someone to play around here for Chonk Chortle. I know the Dominus isn't, of course, up yet, but knowing that he is down and out gives so much opportunity. Chonk is quick, though. They're on the hunt to press into this Baron, and they're going to look for these kills as well. Araki Zoro's on the back end, though, with a great explosive casket to get good return there. And oh my gosh, Fat Cat tries to go in, but it's such a lightning quick punish. Corky to step up and knock up to follow, and another kill to go down here. You've got Yike Z deep, but a teleport is the next to be punished there as Luan just tries to find the one.
Immortals just keep juggling so well. Stopwatches, flashes, barriers blown, everything. Even the Enchanted Crystal Arrow back off cooldown. Luan teleports in again, only to realize that he once more is not allowed to play Wild Rift. Immortals leave that play with not only the Rift Herald, but now the gold advantage. We're going to see a massive taunt from Charm that started this one off, and you can see the layers of CC that come down here. Fat Cat does well to try and capitalize with Raki Zoro stepping back. Watch how this one plays out. Nori almost gets the kill, but the stopwatch is just for long enough.
I love how the separation here is huge in terms of playing around what they can and cannot do in regards to what team member may or may not be there. You start this one off with Araki Zoro, right? The beautiful casket to dissuade most of that pressure. And they're backing off until Hoon responds. Hoon comes in there, and it's lightning quick. They flip the switch so fast as that Orianna walks in to secure that one out as well. A bad misposition out for Luan, but that is just something to pay the price.
As we take our resets in this game and Immortals are able to spend their gold, return to the game that they want to play, Chonk Chortle are trying to take the tempo right back in their favor, splitting the map in the way that they wanted to with the 1-3-1, but it's not exactly the one that we expected. Nori ends up going into the mid lane and instead assigns Fat Cat up to the top lane. I do want to see Aurelia on the side lane, but it's all going to be about Luan and Fat Cat being able to blow this one up, and not so much the Corky taking advantage in the mid lane.
For now here, the pressure enough to push back Black Camel. No, I was curious. I did not really want that back to come through. For now, though, it's 3v2 and a quick arrow to follow. Taunt as well there. They don't have the damage as, yes, it's going to be the response as Luan walks in. Gargoyle Stone Point keeps Charm a little bit healthy in the response for his knockup, but that Rift Herald going to break this turret down. They might potentially look for more, but they've already come to what they find. Or they've already done what they've come for.
And now they can back away with that tier 1 tower secured. They've got a bunch of map pressure, but still the top lane one standing means that Fat Cat's going to be in trouble very soon. Already, the minion wave's crashing, and Yikes is moving his way up. That is if he's even needed. Iraqi Zoro's already dealing plenty of damage, and you know now, if you didn't before, that sticking around near this Baron lane tier 1 is not going to be the move.
I'm really impressed with the performance out of Iraqi Zoro. We talked a lot about the contest that we were going to see Av Luan being that solo pick presence, and it really hasn't shined here for the majority of this game due to not only control in lane from Iraqi, but the fact that he diminishes most of these team fights before they actually have the opportunity to become alive. That explosive cask was something huge that has provided time and time again.
And he's had a massive impact that you illustrate there, not just in the team fights, but also in the side lane. The Gragas, incredible right now, and providing a lot of value to Immortals because of the fact that he can really be anywhere and be just as good, just as neutralizing. Yikes, however, definitely not a neutralizing force. One that more blows open the game, is playing really, really aggressive, even inside of the Baron pit. Moves down, however, realizing that he could pick up more damage at the Dragon.
Yeah, more damage maybe, but just the Dragon alone will be enough here. SD's on the side with Black Camo as well, but they turn their attention back towards that mid. Unable to find the pick that they want with that Enchanted Crystal Arrow, they reroute their attention back onto the objective here. Charm doing a good job to front this one out. Knock up, taunt in there. Black Camel's able to find his way back, at least on the ass, but that is a good explosive cast to push this fight back into its heels.
Oh, the shockwave.
Control trying to capitalize there, but yes, a shockwave stops them in their tracks. They're looking very low there, but a taunt from Charm is able to work out Luan potentially. He's over the wall, but it's going to be the flash there from Yikesy to secure just one more.
Picks up those kills, he turns his attention right back to the source of his gold, picking up even more, 14,000, the most in the game, as Yikes never stops farming, never stops becoming more and more powerful, and is already a huge force to be reckoned with. Iraqi Zoro is a big front line as well. They feel more than comfortable taking this Baron, burning it down along with the help of Hoon, and Immortals are going to be rocketing themselves to a massive lead now, going to break 10,000 with that, take their resets, and start pushing in to break the base.
This is crazy. You know what, Dia? How much do I owe you? You made a claim at the beginning, and Yikes made big on that promise on his own time here. The Graves has shown up more than I ever expected here, and to be fair, against their matchups very, very early on in quarterfinals in Cloud9 alone, I should have expected it.
I tell you what, Zephyr, I want to know which you think is going to be taken out in come game 2. Is it the Graves or is it the Ashe from Gume?
Oh, well, okay, cool. I don't think... I like Gume. I like the engage. It's held a lot of really good presence, and some of those arrows have been absolutely hot here. But Yikesy is just an absolute smash of a jungler to have to deal with here. For now, though, Chonk, they're trying to respond, and maybe they'll make me eat my words. Gume with that Enchanted Crystal Arrow, but it's the big shockwave from Hoon that will maybe be finding an end to this game. They secure some kills as Yikesy is going to step up a little bit of the Hextech belt, but he can't quite catch just yet. Exhaust onto Lewin as he finds his way through the base. He's alive for just one more second.
Baron lets them keep pushing in, but they're not going to go for the end of the game just yet. Not enough picks to feel comfortable with that, and they've got plenty more standing gold to grab, move their way in towards this tier 2. It's the right move from Immortals, and I want to see them continue this pressure. They've already made the right move, taking Charm up to continue allowing the Baron up minions to push in towards this top lane tier 2, get them even more gold, because gold collection is the name of the game right now. Immortals are planning for the end of the game, but they know that that execution is going to come after these resets. What I'm going to do in this last game, or in this last team fight, is I want to just stop, take a minute, and once the Enchanted Crystal Arrow hits, count for how many seconds someone cannot play the game.
Just source out how long that stun just might be here from Gume. Okay, we'll take your bet. He's hot. I don't know. I now going back to your previous point, I don't know. It was strong. I think it was a little bit more short this time around, but in other forces, it definitely has been an absolutely just deletion of just one person here. But, in that fight, I will say Hoon should have majority of the props there. That shockwave was absolutely detrimental towards that squad. Yes, the arrow allowed for him to step up, but the play there with that ball was more than enough to make me happy.
And the stopwatch as well, recognizing that Fat Cat was coming around on the flank, it was the one way for Chonk Chortle to come back in. He just stalls out any damage that can come on to him for a really long time, and that's the real determiner of that fight, is the fact that all of the engage tools that get thrown out. There's the Enchanted Crystal Arrow. All right, no follow-up there. No follow-up, no follow-up.
Okay, my apologies.
What I really want to see is, like, the arrow into the knockup from Galio, into the taunt, into the shockwave, into Iraqi Zoro. That's what we're looking for.
Well, that's not the bet you made me, but I don't even think CC is going to be the name of the game here and now. Fat Cat's in deep, but Exhaust is going to punish the majority of that damage. 2 down as Luan is also to fall. A quick knockup in the backline secures what you need onto Nori, and as Immortals just walk this one down one at a time, they manage to easily find their way to a victory here in Game 1.
That is a really nice performance from them, and though Yikes goes down for his greed, the kill still will go inside the fountain over to Immortals. Another masterclass in Game 1, but Chonk Chortle showed some really important signs of life and some great strategies that they pulled out in the draft. Definitely give me hope for their Game 2.
I think that is fair there, but some of those choice picks that came out here, we talked notably about that Vi on Camel. Not quite the signs of life that I think we look at here from this squad here. If I had to make a choice in changing something up, it would definitely be that. It really didn't hold heavy presence here, and single target picks are good, but they're good early, and it wasn't something that they ever made use of. Oh my god, lower than the support.
Yeah, it's rough, and honestly, there's a reason that we don't see Vi that often. I was hoping that Black Camel would show us something different here, and I think that we definitely got the opportunity to see in a few plays why it is that they selected the Vi, but like you said, the value of it wasn't consistent, and I want to see if going into Game 2, they try and go with that strat again and say we just didn't do it right, or whether they, like us, sort of take the angle of, I see the value of the Vi and I know what we wanted to do, but perhaps there's a different pick that we can use to enable this. I know that things like the Camille were banned out, but if you're looking for engage from the jungle, even the Xin Zhao from Black Camel is almost equally as deadly and provides so much more tankiness.
Right, and even if you want to go back to how you routed it through with Naguara to play through on that Jarvan 4, I even think that is something of a better pick. Yes, it's down the same pipeline, but if that's something you're comfortable with, which Black Camel definitely showed prowess on, I could make an argument for that as well. I do want to pull this one back more though towards the Xin Zhao. I think it has a lot more presence in keeping the kind of AoE control into some of these major team fights, and it really dissuades a lot of the pressure in terms of damage available here. We talk about burst, we talk about lockdown. These were things that absolutely were capitalized on by Immortals. Something like that Xin Zhao's, you talk about that Crescent Guard, could halt that in its tracks.
And it's not just from this Xin Zhao that I want to see something, but Fat Cat really impressed me last game with his ability to create awkward situations for Immortals. And at the point where it started happening, Immortals were pretty darn far ahead, and it didn't end up netting them any game-changing fights. However, you put him on something like an Assassin with a bit of a tankier front line, and I think Fat Cat can really pop off here. It'll punish what is already a very immobile backline that Immortals are opting into. And there's a chance that off of a pick onto either that immobile backline or onto the Graves that was such a big problem, you can change the entirety of the game. I know. I said Graves and you're like, oh my god, right.
You know what? Here, Dia, this is for you. One quick one. Whenever I meet you in person, I owe you that for that Graves pick. You taught me a lesson and I learned it well. Absolutely phenomenal play there from Yike Z. It was a presence in the early all the way to the late, and more importantly, put his team in the right spot necessary to push some of those kind of mid-late game carries into the presence that they needed. That Orianna is something that doesn't really come online. Yes, it has the shockwave to play around, but it was more of that engage tool that really situated things up in the early game for someone like Yike Z to swoop in and actually deal the damage. Later on, that's when you saw the flip. Yike is definitely still strong, but because of his presence that he held, something like that Orianna now is absolutely wiping through most of these backlines in the full iteration of the squad that we saw not just once, but 2 times in that game alone.
And I get really scared when I see that, because the fact is that there were some really nice shockwaves there, but it wasn't this crazy Orianna play that we were seeing. It wasn't these weird off angles that you could only take with Ori. You could replace that with really any hyperscaling control mage, and you're going to get a very similar result. So to change this up, I want to see Chonk Turtles try something entirely different. I don't want to see that Renekton in the top side. I don't think it was bad, but if you're picking something that is ultimately going to be around a neutral top lane, I think you have to opt either into something like the Fiora or something like the Malphite. You can't sort of run this middle ground of champions that have the chance to pop off. You need to know what your role is going into the mid-game fights, because Immortals certainly do.
And if we had to maybe some other top laners to throw out here that could potentially work, not just that Fiora, we did also see Chonk pull out that Jax, and while they didn't come out on top of that game, it still had dominant presence in terms of setting up some of these fights to be in a better position that I think would have much more gravity than the Renekton here. For now, though, we take a look towards these bans, and I'm more than surprised to see the Galio out.
Yeah, this Galio ban from Chonk Turtle is definitely a lot of respect over to Charm. And if you're if you're throwing out the Galio ban, I think you got to follow it up with the Rakan, or you've kind of wasted a little bit of that focus. The Varus from Immortals, though, does make a lot of sense. It's going to be, I think, a very stock standard sort of bans from them, since they've proven, at least in game 1, that they can play their own game. It's up to Chonk Turtle to change this dichotomy, perhaps with things like the Galio and maybe even the Rakan taken away inside of these. They can take it away themselves and try and play something like a dominant bot lane that we haven't seen from Chonk Turtle yet.
That's tough. You know what? I don't know if I put my marbles in the dominant bot lane playstyle for Chonk Turtle. I think, personally, I love when they play through Black Camel, and the fact that that game went and was such a wash was because the Vi worked to be such a kind of wishy-washy pick. Give him something with more agency. Give him with something with a lot more pressure in that early game, and you see the actual heartbeat here out of Chonk Turtle. Playing through that bot lane, while I agree is definitely necessary, I personally feel like Immortals have so much of a strong side control down there that you're setting yourself up for going even or failure even.
I definitely see what you're saying. It's sort of a TL 2 seasons ago situation where, you know, you can try and play their game. It's like playing against RNG when they have Uzi, right? Yeah, there we go. Are you going to opt into it, or are you going to go elsewhere? And it's a big decision that Chonk Turtle are faced with, and I think it's a big thing now is where they're going to end up going, not just in that bot lane or top lane, but what picks they're going to end up using to support what you talked about as the really crucial jungle matchup here, because pushing lanes were something that we saw change the game for Cloud9 in their second game, and despite the fact that they didn't join us, I'm expecting that to be the priority for Chonk Turtle over any sort of individual matchup. Killing minions is their way to winning the early game in a very weird way.
I think that's fair. I'm not surprised to see this second ban come out here, and I think we've settled our bet here to finish this one off, and, well, there's still room for that Grave to be banned. They don't forget it this time. The Ashe is down and out. Gume is a monster, all right? And that Enchanted Crystal Arrow from the mid and on was something that absolutely dominated. And yes, it's not just that split-second stun, it's the fact that it allowed for the complete consequence of this team's actions when you route it through with not just that, but the Shockwave, the Gallo, the Engage, all this to just shut someone down and literally delete them from playing the game, as you yourself said here. The Camille also taken out, not quite a surprise, as you want to make sure that you don't work that one over into the hands here of Yuan, but also the Corki being something.
Yeah, the Corki is what's catching my eye right now, and there are 2 reasons you ban Corki. I mean, he is a very strong pick, but it's either you don't want them to be able to have a safe pick into the mid lane because you want to be able to counter it later on and assume that Immortals want to save their counter pick for something else, or you have a pick that is very specifically countered by Corgi. That one seems a little bit less likely, but with that aside, we'll see how it plays out. Chunk Chortle have made a very nice play in the meantime of removing that Rakan from the table, and Immortals are going to be left with having to pick either the Braum or the Nami, something like that for Charm.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the Nami come out here. He played very, very well on it against Cloud9, and while it was a little bit more reserved in play, it definitely still held a great amount of pressure. The Olaf, though, makes me question if that's going to be the pick here, because if you're drafting the Olaf, you're already telling the team you are looking to dominate, go in, and run you down here.
The Xayah will give your backline some safety, and I think that doubles down into what you already illustrated, wanting to full commit with your front line, leaving your backline to fend for itself. This Xayah with the ultimate should have plenty of time to do that. Chunk Chortle are left with a difficult decision right now, because are you drafting damage? You don't have that safe Xayah to pick up in the face of an Olaf, so perhaps an Ezreal if you're looking to sort of play this one back, or are you going with hyper damage? Are you going with something like a Vayne that we have seen picked up in the qualifiers already?
I might route towards the Kai'Sa too, if they want to take this one a little bit more far forward here. It's definitely a dominant choice, especially since they already banned out what was that Corking Ash. So I would hope that they have an idea of what they really, really want to do with this bot lane, with something as dramatic as that being a statement. This time around, though, Hoon not quite going to get the chance to strut his stuff on that Orianna. We see it flipped sides here into the pocket of Chunk Chortle, and we'll see. Fat Cat was dominant there on that Aurelia, and he split the map like you said. Granted, it didn't have quite the damage or the timing in the overall course of the game to be as impressive, but it was still good. I'm curious to see what he can do with something that is not quite as in-your-face aggressive, but still allows for the opportunity to make those plays happen. Yeah, perfect.
Hey, very nice. Very nice call on the Kai'Sa. I like it, and it does give us a more aggressive option on Chunk Chortle, being able to follow up on the engages from not just the Rakan, but the follow-up there on the Orianna. You can burst somebody down, you can eliminate them very quickly on the Kai'Sa with the reposition. However, Immortals still have plenty to work with, as well, as this would give them a really nice answer to that Kai'Sa running into their back line. The Nami able to Aqua Prison very quickly anybody who tries to approach. Although the big question for me right now is that are Immortals going to pick their mid laner? Because into Orianna, they don't have the Corki. It's a very neutralizing answer, so they're going to need something a little bit more unorthodox. Perhaps the Ziggs.
Could definitely come through here. And if they do pick through with that mid lane, which I fully would expect here, not quite the Ziggs, but just as bursty. And I like this. It follows through in terms of the level of progression, in terms of that of aggression, right? You go in, you're trying to follow through with, say, something like that Olaf, or even set up potentially with that charm. So maybe a little bit more flimsy and not as safe as something like the Ziggs. But if you're looking to test these lanes out, like we come to expect from, say, Immortals here, then it does give them that opportunity. And on top of that, it leaves counterpick open.
That's going to be really important, especially because this Fiora getting counterpicked can be extraordinarily frustrating. We've still got things like the Jax available for the side lane if Immortals want to try and respond with that. If they want to go tank, that's an option as well. But Chunk Chortle do need to round out their composition with, I think, something a little more tanky themselves, and I like the Jarvan here to give them an extra bit of front line and bolster their engage.
Right, that is something we saw what was Chunk Chortle pull out against Naguara here, and it was a question, but it was proven here. Camel does have the ability to early on make major presence here against Jarvan, or with that Jarvan 4 into some of these side lanes. And that's kind of what we were looking for. We want to see a little bit more out of him in that first kind of 5 to 6 minutes or so that didn't really get to capitalize on in comparison to, say, something like that, my apologies, the Vi.
And now with the last pick up, the Malphite is going to be the selection. Yeah, this is really nice, and it's the one of two ways that Immortals could have gone. You can go hard side lane, you can go tank, but you don't want to go something in between. Very much respecting that. The Malphite is going to give you team fight options that can obliterate something like an Orianna, even a Kai'Sa without giving them the chance to move. I see your face. Don't question the accent.
I'll let it slide. Braveheart on cast here with you. You've got the beard and the hair to match, and you know what? It's perfectly fine.
I hope it will be. I am excited for you today, Zephyr. You were talking up Zoro just last game and his potency on the Grokkus. Now it's going to be even more straightforward. When he finds those godlike engages on Malphite, they will be destructive, Chu-Chong Chortle.
I was about to say, I don't know if destructive is the best word for it. Absolutely decimating potentially here, and leaving him that counter pick is going to garner for the future for Immortals. I mean, I cannot set this one up more than that. I will say Luan's great. Luan on that Fiora was an absolute menace when it came to playing against Naguara, but the fact of the matter is you're not going to be able to do very much in that lane against Malphite unless you get very, very lucky, or you have something like Camel coming in early to set you up for the future. Either way, that Mal is going to scale, and you're not going to be given that kind of 4-1 that you maybe were looking to play through here. And on turn of that, while yes, Luan will be able to get into that back line like we saw, since he doesn't just play this Fiora towards the silent, we have the opportunity to see how he can find his way into maybe that AD carry or the mid laner when necessary. You still have to deal with the fact that even with the win, with that presence, you are going to have to respond to Zoro at some point. He is the massive tool that will prevent anyone and everybody from either following up or securing a team fight in your favor.
I think a big part of that is, as you mentioned, the Fiora and the team fight Fiora, which is not something that we often get a chance to touch on, is the grand challenge as it relates to specifically Olaf. I know that we look at Malphite and we say, yes, he wants to be burst down first, but Olaf can be extraordinarily chaotic. And for Yikes, especially, you want to shut him down as quickly as possible, as you already know that he can find some pretty nice angles, lay out some great damage on the Graves. The Olaf should be a very similar story for him. But importantly, when he pops that Ragnarok, the resistance is being reduced and potentially being locked inside of the Cataclysm can end up providing Chortle a lot of healing right back if they're able to adequately focus him down.
I think it's something to capitalize on here, but Immortals aren't one to shy away from engage, as we saw from last game here. If they're in, they're full throttle. And if they're full throttle, I don't think we might get as much as we want in terms of the burst or the absolute destruction on, say, someone like Yike Z. But I might just have to swallow my words at some point, like you make as you set up a majority of these points here.
I know how it goes, trust me. I have made many a call that I end up reneging on, so we'll find out how this one ends up going. It could be our very last game of the day if Immortals can pull this one together again. They've got themselves all the way to the final. They've got themselves that one game up, and they are within touching distance of the $1,600 that comes with first place in the qualifier.
Crazy. I can't believe how fast it has absolutely breached the horizon here. And it, like you said, could be just this one game away here. And to touch on it, it's not just 600, but those qualification points are massive in terms of putting yourself in a prospect for the absolutely bigger money in terms of $15,000 in our finals.
With Luan already starting off pretty well in this side lane, you got to start paying attention to him soon. You can see the vision laid down for Immortals. Bot side tells us they're wanting to focus a little bit more there. Make sure that this Kaisa and Rakan don't start bursting down Gume and Charm and taking away this strength that they already have. But with the Aqua Prison landing, I think you got to be worried the other way around, as Gume and Charm are schooling this lane at only level 3.
I'm more than surprised. We talked about Charm having great presence when it was paired with the Ezreal, but now with the Xayah on its belt, it allows for him to be a little bit more forward with his level of aggression here, which is more nice to see when you usually consider something like that Nami not one to play in that regard.
Now with Black Camel and Luan now able to secure the top lane scuttle, things still going to go pretty even, but importantly, the resets are favoring Immortals right now, with their bot lane being able to get that priority. The backs are going to be relatively even right now, but a small edge going the way of Gume is really going to matter in the ensuing fights, as we haven't really even had that much action yet, and already there's a 300 gold disparity in the bot lane.
Yeah, it's something, but it's definitely not quite enough, as I would say, to potentially swing things in my personal opinion here. I'm still waiting for potentially that impact from Black Camel to come through, or Luan in his own right could be picking up solo kills here on the top side. Zoro on that Malphite's definitely a counter, but he's gotta wait. He's gotta get there first.
Black Camel wisely popping up here, knowing that if Iraqi Zoro sticks around, wants to play the ego game, that he'll be able to shut that down right quick. Now, Bramble Vest, an important purchase against the Fiora, is picked up for Iraqi Zoro, but he's going to be missing out on some farm in the top wave, equalizing the gold, even shifting it back and forth as we watch this game of inches that gets played out in the early game. Take a look at the mid lane as well, because with all these small resets piling up, it's going to be up to Fat Cat and Hoon to start to determine where it is that they want to focus, especially once those level 5s that come in just around now start to be hit, and you get those playmaking tools that come with the form. The extra dashes on Ahri and the big lockdown on the Orianna.
Right. I will point out, though, that I really do feel like these teams like to play more team fight oriented here instead of the lane to lane. We had a lovely idea of maybe the presence of Luan there, but now with that Bramble Vast coming back into lane, I don't think we'll ever see that kind of fight go that way again here. So until we see the group, or potentially what will be the contest for maybe Rift or Drake, unless they handshake those away, I think those windows will await.
With Black Camel
this might be it,
up in the mid lane, this is a little bit surprising, honestly. Nori forced to flash quite early as Immortals make an unusual play over towards the bot side, opting very hard for this dragon, and Chonk Turtles aren't taking the response just yet. You see Luan pinging it out, and guys, we have the Rift Herald, let's just go take it. But it's a little bit of a late take, as Immortals are the ones that arrive first to play, dictate that one, and are going to start stacking up those little bits of passive advantage that they get, especially with the Olaf, great for early objectives. To see what Rift Herald can net Chonk Chortle in response.
And they're going to push this one directly into the hands here of Luan on this Fiora. And I'm not particularly surprised in that regard, but I am very interested to see how that will make its impact come team fight time. Notably, when we did have that group come through there, Immortals were on the 5-man. The only person left out was, of course, Luan here. Either way, Immortals, they're quick on the hunt as well to pick up a turret in their own right in response to this bot lane, knowing that it is a complete separation on this map right now.
I am a little worried, however, because, well, we do see Chonk Chortle picking up the tower in the top lane. The fact is that it was even faster over in the bot lane, and Immortals are ahead of the play in two ways, picking up the dragon that we talked about, but then converting what ultimately the Rift Herald ended up getting Chonk Chortle to equalize it entirely. It's a really nice play from them, and it's one that only comes when you're extraordinarily decisive. With even the bot lane tier 2 quite low now, they've got a really nice thing to work with, especially when it comes to the side lane disadvantages that they're inherently going to be out in the late game. They've bought themselves a lot of breathing room.
All right, and I think this definitely stems from the fact that Immortals are playing on something that we would have expected out of, say, like a team like Naguaga, when they themselves were playing for a little bit more early presence. You look at this composition, and once those 5 windows come on in terms of the ultimates, you have every right to run down Chonk Chortle. Just like this, there's that Cataclysm. They aren't quite able to follow up the way they want due to it. But that's kind of what I'm talking about. The fact that if you step out of line here, Immortals are very quick, as it stands right now, to put you in their place, because when you look at Fat Cat, Nori, Luan, they still need a little bit more time to scale up and be that much more of a pressure as well.
Immortals are rotating around so quickly at the same time, keeping Luan down. This is a 4-man dive in the top lane, and there's no response right now. Luan has to flash and throw down the challenge in the top side. Turret's going to go down, and there's zero response. A big goose egg for Chonk Chortle. Zaraki Zoro should be able to out-sustain and clear out in the aim against a mid, or with the mid lane tower at his back that is full health.
Right, and this time around, there's nothing to convert to here for Chonk Chortle. In turn, we saw them handshake what was the dragon, and technically Immortals came out on top with their own push towards that bot side, but with that turret in its fall, they can't even pull the bot lane.
Raki Zoro was ready for the engage as well, had plenty of backup, but Gume, interestingly enough, is being left up alone against Luan and winning it even still. A nice Feather Storm is going to answer back, and Gume, with no trouble at all, is able to side lane against the Fiora, who was supposed to be dominating in this matchup. In any matchup, Fiora should be coming out ahead. It's what you pick it for, and Turtle are denied that win con.
Well, I definitely would say I expected it. Coming through there, they left the counter pick available in that Malphite, and you prevent a majority there of what the Fiora can do. But on top of that, Raki Zoro doing a great job playing the lane to lane out, not just now, but also on that Gragas in game 1, which I personally think was even harder to work with in terms of playing into that Fiora there. So that in itself is just the level of the player and the skill to skill matchup there on that top lane.
And well, it's going to start shifting away from top lane. The focus is being taken away from this Fiora, who's already been set ridiculously far behind. We start looking towards the mid lane and towards the second round of objectives as both Rift Herald and Dragon are spawning once more. And Luan wants to try and challenge around this Rift Herald. This time, Immortals have decided that they wanted handshaking again. Well, the Dragon should be going over to Chonk Chortle. Raki Zoro waiting in the wings right now. Perhaps wants to try and find a play with Gume, but I'd be surprised if they go for this. Gume, thinking about it. Charm looks for the steal. Not going to happen. And they end up still getting the Rift Herald while applying a nice amount of pressure over on the other side of the map.
Well, this time around, though, that Rift Herald might extend more than the Dragon here. We saw what happened when they themselves made their own trade for the handshake in turn for the Rift Herald. Let's see what they can do when it's in their pocket. Black Camel there trying to find engage. They do get a double knock-up, but they can't quite pull the trigger there. You've got Yikes here, as well as Hoon already rotating down from that top side, playing around what was just that Rift Herald take to defend anything and everything they got thrown at them.
Oh, and Immortals know as well as we do right now that Gume is in position to fight this one, has the Xayah already, and burns through that tower with the Rift Herald now crashing with Nori finally grouping up. You've got the chance to fight, but it is slipping through your fingers. Got Black Camel on the reset from the base. Coming out, but with the Rift Herald expiring, Immortals need to push this one no further. They've already secured themselves all 3 outer towers, losing only 1 in the process, and have a 4,000 gold advantage to work with and abuse off these resets.
Right, and look how quickly, from the way they open up that map, they're down to lay out the vision in preparation there. You already see them laying up that mid, but also what is this red side as well here. So the fact of the matter is, you're not just taking the turret here. You are also guaranteeing you the ability to rotate and find what you want from any direction now that those tiers are down.
Yeah, there's this Prima vision that comes with mid lane as well. Since Hoon isn't going to move, is going to continue clearing out the waves, and the minions are going to give you that little bit of extra data on it. He rotates through somebody like Black Camel, who's made his way down towards the Dragon lane. No objectives up, though, means that Immortals have no reason to fight, and neither do Chonk Chortle. And we have this economy game being played out in the meantime. If you make a big misstep, I'm sure you're ready to be collapsed on by both sides. But for right now, it's a very neutralizing game, and one that gives Luan a path back in, as he's able to side lane, pick up some gold, and crucially get closer to those item breakpoints that will let him take a 1v1 with somebody.
Right. I think scaling is definitely a point that we have to bring up here, because Nori, Luan, Fat Cat, they will get to the point where they are a definite force to be feared here in this game. Now, Immortals still have their foot on the pedal, and they've got plenty of time to work this one out here, because say Luan isn't even at the point where he can take that 2v1 in the presence of, well, Charm being such a menace when it comes to sustain. But that idea alone is enough to prove that Chunk still has a light at the end of the tunnel.
Gume's still got the ult there as well. That says a lot, especially against the Fiora. Having the confidence to hold on to that. Has healed up plenty with the sustain that you mentioned Charm gives them. And is starting to whittle away at the tier tower. Gume dipping back into the jungle. He's going to encounter this Luan once more and almost takes down the Fiora in 3 or 4 short autos.
Yeah, 1 or 2 more, and that would have been it for Luan there, and it could be more than just that. A quick charm and burst to follow. Yes, they go gold, which is going to keep Fat Cat alive, and a dodge from the tidal wave is going to do that much and more there. We see the shockwave expended out there to prevent that much further of a rush, but in turn, they're losing out the turrets in the side lane.
30 seconds until the dragon, though, means that Immortals are going to start their reset paths. Gume is very close to the next item here and is going to be able to, I think, ideally pick up a camp or two, but was resetting on vision, and Luan thought about it. With this next dragon almost assuredly going to Immortals. However, they've got that 6,000 gold lead. They've got everybody set up and ready to go, and most importantly, they've got their Xayah on 3. Make it 3.5 items as those boot enchantments come in with the stopwatch, making her even harder to kill. You have an undeniable backline strength as Immortals that just simply cannot be rivaled right now. Be it Fat Cat, be it Nori, be it Luan, nobody, not even any two combined can start to rival Gume. And with that steal not going their way, Black Camel's going to slink away with that flash. Ocean Dragon goes to Immortals, and they get that extra little edge in the region that'll continue bolstering them forward in this game.
This is just absolutely absurd. It's hard to find a place for Chonk Chortle to get a sign of life back into this one. We talk about scaling potential, but to reiterate, Immortals have not let up. From objective to objective, they've been there high priority early and on, and then when you, Chonk Chortle, try to step up, something like that happens. It's a good shockwave, and it's a return that they needed to behold here. Oh, finally, something plays out in their favor. A little bit too aggressive from Immortals.
Yeah, you will see Gume walking up there, and you know as soon as that knockup lands, they didn't have the data, the vision wasn't quite there on the Orianna, but still, they're trying to find something, and with the challenge down on the Olaf Ragnarok, he's still going to be able to flash away and escape. Immortals, even without Gume, are doing quite well inside of the team fight, finding themselves not 1, not 2, but 3 picks, and now the Baron.
That's crazy. Gume dies and they call in Big Brother there. Big credit to Charm there. I know I called it out already, but that tidal wave to disrupt any of the damage that might have prevented Yikes from getting everything he wanted here on that Olaf was more than sufficient to put Immortals on a foot ahead here. So now they transition that to a Baron, which will continue to pressure out Chonk Chortle that much harder.
This is the really scary stuff as well, because Immortals have been dancing around, not wanting to take any engages in between objectives, and have still been pressuring you all the way to the point where you've lost most of your tier 2s. Now, they can rinse and repeat that exact same thing, be it waiting for an objective or no. The reality is that Immortals don't have to fight to win this game right now, because they are individually stronger in the lanes, and now opting into the 1-3-1 themselves. It is going to be a very difficult game of sustain for Chonk Chortle, in which Black Camel needs to be decisive to land them some sort of pick.
Last tier 2 turret. Last tier 2 turret down here for the side of Chonk Chortle on the aggressive push that is that Baron. We're still waiting for Yikes to approach what is that top side to kind of split this into the appropriate 4-1 necessary to really put pressure down here, but I don't even think Immortals care. Look at that. A far and off charm, a huge burst to follow, and half the damage on that mid lane turret.
They've still got Yikes heralding in the top wave as well. Can easily take the 1v1 against Luan, although it's going to turn into a 1v2 if he sticks around for too long. Luan gets reduced in health pretty far down, and Redemption coming in to seal the deal. Not on him, but on the turret is huge for Immortals. They find the pick onto Nori as well, and are going to be choking out Chonk Chortle to find their way to the 2-0. It's coming in soon. The last fight has to start now.
It has to happen at some point here as the final turret falls. That's going to be the grand duel expended there. Yes, Luan is gold, but not for long. Looking more than dead there, as the gray is the color that's appropriate. And they might not even take a single other kill. They just walk it out and finish the Nexus handily. Oh my gosh.
Immortals had their eyes on the prize, and they will be your first place winners in the very first qualifier here at Rift Masters. They sent themselves home with not only a really nice chunk of change, but also the points necessary to be invited to the playoffs at the very end. Immortals, in one of what is only going to be 3 qualifiers, taking first place is a big, big step.
Right, and I honestly think it is more
more than well-deserved here from Immortals. That game alone is enough to strike fear into any team competing here at Rift Masters this split. That is just absurd. The fact that you yourself never have to look for a solid engage, a solid fight to behold, a team fight that would even maybe give Chalktroll the little bit of presence that they need to come back into it. And the fact that you just route this one down, just turret, dragon, handshake. Yeah, we handshake, but guess what? We still come out on top. You guys take Rift. Guess what? We get the same iteration of turrets in the fact that you do the same. I mean, it's just incredible.
It's a macro chokeout, and it's really well done by Immortals, very clearly demonstrating a mastery of the game in the first qualifier. I think that there's nobody who competed in the first qualifier who couldn't stand to watch a few of these games and pick up on what Immortals are doing, how their game plans are shifting. Is even when Gume and Charm aren't their main win cons, you've still got other people stepping up. Iraqi Zoro has been huge on this team. We've seen Yikes be able to pilot the Graves like nobody else can, and even in the mid lane, it looks like they have this flexibility that can set them apart. And that's the really scary thing, is that Immortals, yes, they can end up with the first place at the end of the first qualifier, but come the second, you've got to be prepared for them, and it's a long road ahead.
And I want to give a little bit of credit towards Chalktroll. This team did look good through what was Naguara in their 4 games that they played yesterday coming out of quarterfinals. They're aggressive. They get in your face, and they like to test you into the lane v lane. Sadly, you can't do that against Immortals. Game 1 was a testament to that alone and just the skill on those 1v1 matches, but they pulled back even harder in Game 2. This is an absolutely disrespectful end to the day. I cannot stress that enough. The fact that you don't let them play their win condition, you don't let them play the game alone, is enough to just absolutely decimate any mental and any stride you have.
And you got a whole week to make it up, as our next qualifier will be starting then. So we'll get the time to sort of break that down. You'll get the time to be able to come back and fight for the championship that I'm sure Chalktroll will have in them. But plenty of other good teams, plenty of the great teams fell along the way. Cloud9, definitely another one that we got to keep our eyes on coming back next time, because that they made, even though it was a 2-0, they made that second game look really, really close. And you can see how these teams can start to take games, series off of each other, and have us end up in a totally different final game.
Right, and then to sum up Cloud9 there, just to give my own personal opinion before we work this one out, I love that they play through Tarzan, and I love that his jungle presence is something that leads through a majority of these games, but just looking at Griff alone in that bot lane was enough to show me that there's so much more promise to the team that is guaranteed for their future. On that Kai'Sa in that first game, Griff held an absolute domination on that backline, and if given the tools to scale up appropriately, play around this composition, I really do feel like Cloud9 could be that much or equivalent to, say, a monster that something like Immortals is.
Yeah, and we saw really nice signs from Naguara as well, with Hitman on the Renekton, I think looking really good. I was impressed by Fat Cat on Chalktroll. I know that yesterday and even today I was talking up Camel all the time, but Fat Cat showed us something really interesting in Game 1 on the Aurelia with his willingness to start fights that I'd like to see enabled in future iterations of their play, because you're going to have the chance to revisit not only, you know, brushing up on the existing game plans that you already have, but even iterate on new ones, and Fat Cat having a little bit more autonomy on something even like the Ahri that was opposite him in the second game of the finals would be really good.
And to touch on some more players that I think did well to keep this train a-rolling here, Luan in that top side for Chalktroll looks absolutely fantastic, and the fact of the matter was Zoro was a counter away every single time from wiping these games. From the Gragas just being the straight duel to the 1v1 to the Malphite being an absolutely perfect pick, Luan didn't get much of a presence into that finals there. But everything preceding that was fantastic. The fact that you can see presence out of a top laner, not just alone in lane, but the fact that they can run down team fights on, say, something just like that Fiora. The fact that we even get to talk about team fight Fiora is due to Luan alone today, which is something remarkable in its own right.
Yeah, it was really well kept down actually in the second game, and a large part of that had very little to do with the individual play. It wasn't so much about 1v1s or even 2v1s that Luan was losing, but it was about an incredible amount of gold that was funneled into specifically Xayah before the Fiora and Xayah even met. If you don't have 1-2 items already, and Fiora isn't already set behind by the matchup into the Malphite, that's going to go very differently. Fiora's going to kill you 100 times. Or I guess I could say 99 out of 100 times. It's a statistical likelihood. And the fact that that was actually turned on its head by some really decisive play around the dragon and then the tower, I think demonstrates as well the value of Rift Herald and when you can manage to use that, because Immortals opted into ignoring first Rift Herald, taking the dragon that normally we see a lot of teams lose momentum on, but turning that into a very aggressive play towards the bot side. And a lot of that had to do with a little bit of hesitation on the side of Chunk.
Oh. For now, though, those are the residing kings that have graced us here on Rift Masters, but there's still a lot more action that still worked its way out, even if you were here alone watching just the Immortals game here against Chonk Chortle. In our third place match, Cloud9 managed to work out a 2-0 victory here against Naguara.
Very nice stuff, and I think that's going to send Naguara back to the drawing board. After suffering 2 2-0 defeats in a row is going to be a really interesting battle for them moving into week 2, because we talked about the points of strength of this roster, especially with Hitman, and you mentioned Sirius coming into the day, but to go down 0-2 twice in a row, I think has definitely demonstrated to them that there are other areas that they can focus on, or perhaps double down on that focus to get a really strong point of their own. Because we think about people like Cloud9 and Chonk Chortle, they have these star players that they focus their compositions and their game plans around, and Naguara have ability for everybody to succeed, but didn't have a game plan that sort of funneled gold into 1 or 2 people.
Right, so there you are, your final point scores here of the day. Of course, 15, 10, 8. Obviously, Immortals there in the lead here, going to carry that one away happily as they approach what will be our following qualifiers here. But don't count anyone else out. Dia sets up some great points regarding the potential futures for these teams, not just the star players that might exist, but the fact that these guys are still waiting to craft what might be their own win conditions that could take them to an equal or greater victory.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see. You can see the point system working out since it is just our first qualifier. If you do end up getting first place, you get the 15 points. But even getting 4th twice is going to be better than that. So Immortals do have to continue to show up to at least that level, lest they be usurped by Naguara. That's the really scary thing. Qualifier 2 is coming up, though. It's going to be happening next week. And if you believe that you've got what it takes to take these teams down, I encourage you to register. You can join our Discord over at RiftMasters. Follow us on Twitter for more details regarding that, because I want to see each and every one of you who are tuning in take on these squads, get the chance to become a Rift Master yourself. That's going to be all for us this week, but remember, tune in on Monday to watch even more of the qualifier action here at Rift Masters.
And everybody wondered around, will she ever know the feeling of tears? All she said to them was, live your life just like you're young again. No, don't you cry, just get back up again. 'Cause if you wanna laugh, then live it better. If you want love, then stay together. If you wanna smile, then be forever. She was the curious kind, to hate she was blind, always love on her mind, just come my way. She couldn't quite figure out what fear's all about. Bye.